It's 7:45 in the morning. That means it's OTB AM live across all of our social platforms on YouTube, on Facebook and on Twitter. Of course, you can just listen to us if that's your preferred option on offtheball.com. Just go into the top right-hand corner and click play. Owen is here.
A very good morning to you.
How are you?
Good.
Are you stoked by these changes?
Yeah.
Kerry traditionally have high fielding, beautiful high fielders of a ball, leaping like a salmon and coming down with it untouched in midfield.
Yeah, rumour has it that Owen the Bomber Listen is back in training with Kerry. Then they are back already training.
Darragh O'Shea.
Darragh O'Shea's in there. Tommy Walsh obviously is going to be back there. And Kieran Donaghy's done a U-turn on his
Instagram. He could just stand there in midfield, catch ball, lay it off.
Yes.
Win marks.
Well, two of the big men in midfield and then two of the big men inside the 20-metre line, and that would probably constitute about 4-14 in every match.
Yeah. So in case anybody's wondering what we're talking about, there have been 5 significant rule changes suggested by the Standing Committee on Gaelic Football Playing Rules, and the committee have asked for the rules to all be considered as a collective, that they come as a package, and let's play with them for a year and see what happens. So they were put out yesterday, published, they will be debated a little bit, and then they'll go to the GAA's management committee for implementation and trial basis for the league next year, and at that point there'd be a congress and then there'd be Championship 2020. So the basic rule changes are you can't kick the ball out inside your own 45 anymore. You have to kick the ball forward from sidelines except inside the opposition 13. On the kickouts you can only have 2 people in midfield. Everybody else, your 6 defenders, have to be behind the 45 when the ball is kicked. So it's like an offside rule from soccer, a little bit. What else have I got? What else am I missing? Oh, sin bin. Sin bin for 2 yellow cards.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's like, I can come back on after I do a yellow card tackle, which is like basically I can kill you in some games and get a yellow card. I can kill you again, and I'm still not sent off. I can come back on in 10 minutes.
Yeah, the people who find issue with the black card won't be satisfied with this, because the black card is still very much there. It's just instead of you being reduced, or not being reduced at all, that player being replaced, you will be reduced to 14 men for a 10-minute period. So
I think that's a better idea, actually. Like if the black card had been a 10-minute punishment as opposed to...
But there's a serious problem with the actual implementation of the black card and what constitutes a black card foul. So that hasn't been addressed whatsoever in these playing rules. Granted, I know that we can't say all these little problems have to be addressed in this one sort of move. So I don't necessarily agree with that. I think sometimes you need incremental change, and I think maybe parts of this are positive. The other thing you didn't mention, did you mention the hand passes?
No, so a limit on three hand passes.
Yeah. Now, I'm not sure about this. Like Mike Quirk is saying in the Examiner this morning, it's a symptom rather than the actual genesis of the problem, which I would tend to agree with. When you look up and you see a mass defence, you're less likely to kick the ball into it than you are to hand pass to your mate beside you. So I think that is the reason why hand passing has become rampant in modern Gaelic football.
And McGinley's going to join us a little bit later on to give us his thoughts. There's some belief in the ether that this was an anti-Dublin thing to try and stop Dublin's dominance.
Bullshit.
But actually, there's also a belief in the ether that it's anti-Northern football because, you know, we all saw what happened in the club match in Derry just recently when, you know, there was a bit of showboating, toe-tapping going on inside their own half and no one was coming out. Slot Neal just kept possession for like 4 minutes.
If this is a targeting of Dublin, like, it's actually hilarious. It's very, very funny. I would like to see the face of...
It's not, though. It isn't.
It's not. But let's just say...
It wouldn't work.
It clearly wouldn't work. I mean, this will define sort of high catching once again. It will make it more of a skill in the game if it is implemented. It will play right into the hands of Brian Fenton and Michael Dara-McCauley and Brian Howard. We've seen Brian Howard field high balls.
He's not bad at fielding high balls. Speaking last night on Virgin Media Sport, Niall Quinn had this to say about another boring Manchester United performance.
Confusion, I think, in the ranks, because I watched Alexis Sanchez walk off the pitch and he looked like the most confused professional footballer I have seen in a long time. He shrugged his shoulders, he walked off, he shook his head. He does not know why he's not performing as well as he can. I think a lot of the players are in the same boat. They're saying, this is not my form. I'm better than this. It's not happening for me. And then through that, you've people like Pogba, whose Instagram now becomes more important than his crest. It's really, really frustrating. And I've never played at Man United, but I always admired that when you went to Old Trafford, you were going into an inferno of passion, of speed, of doing things quickly, of controlling a match, and you had to be so good just to get a sniff or something out of it. And now we've seen over the last few weeks teams going along, have a bit of a game plan. These are handy, you can get by. And it's very, very frustrating. I mean, Manchester United fans, they're great. I mean, how they're not booing early on in games at that poor fare that's served up, I do not know. And I look and say, how can it be different? How can Mourinho do things different? When you've Matic and Fellaini as your two in the middle, where's the craft? Look, think yourself back, think of the Scholes, whoever. There's great players we can put in there over the last 10, 15 years. The craft in the team has been sacrificed. The pace and Guile is there, but it's been sacrificed to play under a routine that's just not the Manchester United way. And I was bored. I was bored out of my head watching that match.
Two things, right? He's dead right. But also, as predicted, Niall Quinn has become a brilliant pundit. Like overnight, freed from the shackles of Sky. It's like I don't have to toe the line on Sky anymore. I can say what I want. There's no way he would have said that on Sky. He is emerged. It turns out Niall Quinn is a brilliant pundit. Yeah,
it's a very good point there. When you said there, turns out Niall Quinn is a brilliant pundit. I was about to say, well, that was a natural prediction because I actually forgot that he was a pundit before appearing on Virgin Media Sport. I was like, well, he was like Mick McCarthy. He was involved in football, wasn't he? But actually, yeah, it's a good point. He's really come out of his shell. He's brilliant.
He used to get loads of crap on Twitter when he was with Sky, and suddenly, I think, just free from that production and the way that they produce football, it's far better. And I think that that's going to be a massive success for them. So.
Yeah, he is totally right, as in being bored out of his tree watching that yesterday. I was tempted to actually go on YouTube and watch the full 10 hours, like Gandalf dancing to the Crazy Saxman music, because that would have actually been more entertaining than watching the 1 hour and 50 minutes or whatever it is.
Give me the Gandalf Crazy Saxman.
It's just Gandalf bopping his head on a loop for 10 hours.
Which, is it in... It's a clip from The Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Or is it?
Well, of course it is.
Well, it could have been Ian McKellen.
Where else is Gandalf?
It could be random punter dress. I mean, it's YouTube.
It's actually it is the real Gandalf, so to speak. I was tempted to do that and watch the full 10 hours instead of watching Manchester United last night, which might have been a more entertaining alternative to what we witnessed. Like, do you actually are you kind of a captive audience when you watch Manchester United?
No, I was legitimately looking forward to last night's game.
Yeah,
and then
that's morbid.
And then beforehand I was thinking, oh, okay, right. So I thought that perhaps the Champions League was going to be the thing. He doesn't really give a shit about the league this year. I thought that the Young Boys' performance, I was following on from my bullshit logic.
Yes.
I was doubling down on my crappy mistake. That's what I was doing. I was buying into the nonsense that I'd heard from people going, oh yeah, this is a credible thing. I saw them play well. I thought that was okay. And then it's like, no, they're just shit.
Yeah, they really are. Well, see, the thing is, they're not shit. Like, on an individual basis, they are not bad at football. You can't say that Romelu Lukaku and Alexis Sanchez are as bad as they performed last night. They're nowhere near that level. Alexis
Sanchez might be. I'm not sure anymore.
Are you really telling me that?
I'm not sure.
Well, I would actually say so.
Maybe he's just past it. Maybe he's like, yeah, I am worth 50 million quid. Am I really going to work as hard as I did when I was worth nothing? Maybe I'm not.
Even a player in their mid-30s wouldn't speed past the checkpoint where you're past it, like Alexis Sanchez has done in the last 12 months. This has been a rapid downfall if that's the case.
Maybe
it would be one of the most extraordinary case studies in modern football.
Maybe he has a flesh-eating virus. It just hasn't been diagnosed the same way that Santi Cazorla had.
Yeah, well, Santi Cazorla on one leg would probably be better than Alexis Sanchez.
I mean, he definitely would at this point. All right, so Virgin Media Sport is the new home of European football in Ireland, with more than 400 UEFA Champions League, Europa League and Nations League games live this season. Virgin Media Sport is exclusive to all Virgin Media TV customers. You can also download the TV Anywhere app and stream all the action whenever and wherever they like. Here's what's coming up on the show. I'm going to speak with Daniel Harris specifically about the Manchester United issue at around about 8:05, I suspect. Going to be getting to that. We're going to talk about the GAA proposals a little bit later on with Enda McGinley, and if you want to get your view in on whether or not these new rules are going to work, or whether or not they're anti-Dublin, or indeed they're anti the northern teams, sorry, I should have pronounced that correctly, then you can tweet us at Off The Ball, or at Off The Ball AM is the specific Twitter account for this show. And we're also going to talk with Chuck Mindenhall today about UFC 229.
We are indeed, of MMA fighting and the ringer. Good old guest. He kind of had said previously after the first press conference that McGregor is like Muhammad Ali. So I'm sure...
Did he walk that line back a bit? Or is he like, no, I'm down at this?
I would say that he took that ball and ran with it.
Woo! Okay, I'm looking forward to that. That's coming up at 9:10. Now, time for the papers.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
So, Colm Keys is the lead story on the back of the Irish Independent this morning. GAA's plan for radical rule changes set to face opposition, and in fairness, he's got straight to the point with this. Former Down footballer Mark Poland tweeted yesterday, "Good luck to the poor referees if these proposals make it to Congress and are passed."
Such a valid point.
I don't know about that. I mean, come on, how hard is it to count 3? 1, 2, 3. How hard is it?
How hard is it? What about when you're facing the goalkeeper, trying to make sure that the tee is on the right place, that the ball is on the tee, seeing that there are actually 6 players inside that 45,
Hold on,
6
stop,
players inside that 45,
no,
2 inside.
You can't
How
take
on earth
it.
can one person police all this?
Well,
there is no way one referee is going to be able to police all these rules that are all brought in at once.
2 linesmen. Come on, it's not that hard. So
The linesman want the job, remember. 2 referees is absolutely essential here because...
Maybe. I'm not arguing that 2 referees isn't a significant improvement in this, but hang on a second. What from this kickoff is so hard that the referee stands on the 45 and says, you've got to wait until I'm on the 45, and then he blows the whistle and goes, well, there's the 2 midfielders and their opposite numbers, and there's the 6 defenders and 6 forwards.
Yeah, but screw that. Like the waiting for the referee to get to the 45-metre line. Just because...
The referee isn't in the square. Well, what referee could be on the 21? It's like a gentle jog back. I mean, come on, it's not me refereeing this game. It's like people who have done a little bit of athletic training at some point in the last 6 months. But you can waddle back to midfield.
He can, but he might not do it quick enough to get into the correct position, which, as you say, is the 45-metre line, so that you can see the other 45. You need a referee on either side of the pitch to be able to police this kick-out stuff properly.
So you don't. You're standing on the 45 and you're looking straight across and the ball's kicked out. And you're like, oh yeah, well, once that ball's kicked out, off they're free to go.
Imagine the frustration having to wait for that referee to get to that 45-metre line every time.
But only Cluxton and maybe Rory Beggan take the kickouts that fast that they're like, okay. And actually, you know what?
So it is a disadvantage to Dublin.
You can still take kickouts. Of course, it's a massive disadvantage to Dublin. What about club level, says Tommy? What about the club and the children? What about it? It's not that hard. It's like, okay, yeah, I need to be on the 45 and I need my 2 linesmen, one of them to be close to the action and the other one to stand on the 45 and go, okay, what about junior B club level? Well, you know what?
I think Mark Poland is right. I think it's a very, very tough one. It's already very, very hard, a very, very hard game to referee. This will make things more complicated. Therefore, it gets harder to referee.
I don't know how much more complicated it's going to be. But anyway, Rory Gallagher from Fermanagh and obviously ex-Donegal manager says, people are frustrated with teams keeping the ball. If you stop teams playing the ball back inside their own 45, it makes it easier for a team to hunt the ball down and will lead to more excitement. At the minute, 145 metres, the length of the field, is too big to be chasing down in a 15-man sport. I played 7s with St. Gall's. It made it very exciting when you couldn't play the ball backwards inside your own half. So I think one of the key points that was mentioned in the Mike Quirk piece was that, or maybe it was John Fogarty's piece beside it, that these, at the moment, are suggestions, and they're going to go out and take on board what everybody's saying, and then they will put the final suggestions through to the management committee. So this isn't a done deal.
No.
They're open to... Now, I say that. Past experience would suggest that they're open to a little bit of, we can change this, but actually they're not really. It's like, we're going to go with this, and on this hill we're going to die. So we'll see how much change happens between now and then.
At least it's not going straight to Congress. At least there is some sort of experimental process, which is good.
Well, I mean, there was an experimental process before with the sin bin, and Mickey Hart basically killed it in the McKenna Cup. Like, it was supposed to be in for the league. It might have made some GAA historian out there will correct me specifically about what happened, but it might have made it through rounds 1 and 2 of the league, or maybe it didn't make it in as far as the league.
I think it did.
And then I was like, no, this can't work. This is a shambles. Because loads of players getting sin-binned. Anyway, Captain Best back for Ulster to begin Japan bid. Roy Best bid to make next year's Rugby World Cup in Japan will begin on Friday as he returns to Ulster action against Connacht. So good to see Roy Best back. After a period out, but I think they're probably going to rest him. And then good stats from Munster's Carberry conundrum, whether or not they pick him this week. So obviously Joey Carberry was injured last year and so therefore didn't play that much for Leinster, but the number of minutes that he played for Leinster last season totalled 129 according to Cian Tracy. for Leinster in the whole season, 129 minutes. Already this year for Munster, he's played 267 minutes. So there's now some doubt that not only are we going to be without Johnny Sexton at the weekend, but we're also going to be without Joey Carberry.
Yeah, saving for the European games. It's not just due to injury that he didn't get much game time last year.
It is, mostly.
It's mostly due to the fact that Johnny Sexton was the number 110 for Leinster.
But sure, they would have played him elsewhere. I would say that the number of minutes that he was on the bench is not much more than that.
Pretty much the entire European campaign.
He had 2 bad injuries last season.
I know he did, but that was around November. You get into the thick of the stuff which Munster are going to be involved in this season. He was on the bench for the whole thing.
Will it catch on? This is the good front cover on the Irish Examiner sports section this morning. GAA to trial new rules in 2019 to improve football. I mean, Donny midfield, Donny in the full forward line.
Well,
so
obviously,
the other new rule is if you catch a ball from a kick, so if you're attacking and you're outside the 45 and you kick the ball through to anybody inside 20
to 20, yeah.
Yeah. And they catch it, they've got a free kick, and it's basically they've got 15 seconds to take it. So it's actually a proper, you can stop, take your 3 steps back, kick it over the bar.
Yeah, it goes for the defensive team as well,
which is interesting. Will that not lead to I'm going to have 4 defenders in that line?
That's exactly what I thought. Maybe it's just me being cynical, but I initially think you're just going to bunch. If there's a big full forward, you're just going to bunch around him. It's just going to lead to a situation. If you've got a smart coach, you've got a situation where nobody's catching the ball inside the 20-metre line. And every ball is getting broken.
What about... do I have to have 6 forwards inside the opposition 45 when they're kicking the ball out?
Yes.
I have to have 6 forwards.
Yes.
I can't have 2 forwards there and 10 at 10.
That's what I thought, but I actually just double checked that this morning, and no, you do. It has to be 6-2-6.
What if one of my lads is injured down there? We've got to wait for him to get up, walk the length.
Yeah, or get off the pitch. I presume that isn't specified in the rules, but I presume there's a situation where you just need to get off the pitch or whatever, or you're out of play and you're not allowed to play the ball again while the ball is active, whatever it may be. I don't know. It's the thing is just about that. So from the 45 into the 20, the only time when that will actually lead to a clean catch is one of the big high balls that Donaghy would have taken back in the day.
Yeah.
But say if you want to make a break, if you've got a James O'Donoghue run to the corner, that ball's not going clean into him. There's a bounce before it gets into him, so that's not going to be much benefit to your corner forward, so to speak.
No.
It is targeted for the art of high fielding in front of the goal.
What if I catch the ball in the penalty spot? There's a 13-metre exclusion zone. So I catch the ball in 13 metres, I can turn around and blast it, but everybody can be on the...
What do you mean?
So the high ball comes in, I'm playing full forward, I catch the ball on the penalty spot.
Yes.
I'm allowed to take 15 seconds to take my free shot.
No, you got to go back to the 20-metre line.
Oh.
So all the frees that are awarded are from the position where you catch the ball, but out on the 20-metre line. So that helps if you catch the ball right on the corner flag. At least you got to bring it out to the 20-metre line, and it's not as acute an angle as it might have been. So there is an advantage in that position, but as you say, if you're right in front of the goal, it's disadvantageous. But I guess you don't want to be too, you don't want to punish the defenders too much if they're not somebody to catch the ball.
I get the thinking behind the 6 and 6, that transforms the game. That means kick out, you play it forward really fast, there's goal chances.
Yeah, and also trying to formulate a blanket defence, even in open play, would require quite a bit of fitness, because half of your blanket is having to track back quite quickly from forward positions.
Yeah,
and
I guess
you're a little bit more worn out.
Yeah, it then becomes there will be a line of 10 players in the 45, 4 in the middle, 10 players in the 45, and 1. There'll be a lonely full forward and full back on the 2 ends.
Yeah, could easily see that happen.
What was the game? Gouts?
What?
What was the game that you played when everybody lined up?
I
in the schoolyard?
It was probably phased out of the schoolyards by the time I got there.
He's saying Bulldog. I mean, that was what they played. That was what they
Red
played.
Rover.
That's what they played in
Bulldog,
England.
the classic.
Okay, so the Irish Times, their first 2 pages are really about the soccer last night. So it's United show little sign of improvement in Dower draw. The special one, it would seem, isn't special anymore. José exit. Is that how we're saying? José exit.
Yeah, one or the other. Column A or column B, whichever one you want.
Silva snatches face-saving winner for Manchester City. So Man City going, it's actually okay for them. This little bit of difficulty early season, not necessarily the worst thing for them?
No, I don't think so. I think it's sort of the second season syndrome of actually being Premier League champions, which we've seen in recent years, can be a massive struggle for a lot of teams, and they seem to be coping with it results-wise very, very well. They probably deserve to get that 3 points yesterday. David Silva, like, is he the greatest Manchester City player of all time? Like, just so many important performances down through the years. This is, of course, the greatest era in the history of Manchester City. Is he the best player in this era? It's him or Aguero, really, isn't it? Kevin De Bruyne is almost there, but he's just one of those players that we almost forget to mention sometimes, just his absolute brilliance. And it was Silva to Silva yesterday. Great ball by Bernardo Silva for that winner for David.
Okay, the one other story that's been doing the rounds is the Joe Marler story. So Joe Marler has admitted that in the build-up to England matches, whenever there was a call-up, he would deliberately get sent off or sin-binned to avoid being selected for England. He says it was to do with the anxiety of being away from his family. He has retired from international rugby over the last while. It's a pretty bizarre story, and then obviously everybody went back and looked at the periods when he would have indiscipline and he'd be getting a 3-week ban just before the November internationals or just before the Six Nations. He would punch somebody and get a yellow card or in attempting to get a red card. So it'll be interesting to see exactly when he goes into a bit more detail about what was going on with it, what it was that made him not want to play. Was it a psychological thing? Was it like not wanting to be involved with the England setup as they stand at the moment? Because obviously, you know, a fairly talented, seasoned international player.
Yeah, we had this conversation with Quinny last Friday, and I think we kind of looked at it in a very superficial level that you want to maintain your club career. If you want to make as much money as you possibly can as a rugby player, well, then you need your club career to last as long as possible. And if that means giving up your international career, so be it. But there's clearly a lot more beyond the surface than what seemed.
25 grand a pop for every game you play for England as well.
Is that true? Yeah.
Yeah. That's what he was saying. He was trying to extend his England career for financial reasons. But so, Budo sweet on Waldgeist as money comes for Faber Fancy. 3 mispronunciations in the one headline there for me.
Never read the headline before you read it out loud.
Definitely need to. Yeah. So a cut above. Depleted Spurs set to be outclassed by Barca at Wembley. I'm definitely looking forward to this. Spurs and Barca should play good football tonight as a bit of an antidote to what we saw last night. And here is the Irish news for you. GAA to organise challenge games to test new rules, which is a good idea. Plans to shake up Gaelic football with 5 radical proposals.
Back page of the Herald this morning is Mo Boys calling for José. Limp job piles pressure on United boss. That's Paul Scholes' quotes, I believe, carried there in the back of the Herald. And Brogan says it's too hard to walk away from the dubs. Like, how could it be easy to walk away from a team that have won 4 All-Irelands in a row when you've just come back from an injury? You've probably got enough left in the legs. Great strength and conditioning team there in Dublin to look after you as well. He's primarily conditioned to go again for 2019, I would suspect, to be part of that 5-in-a-row winning team. Back page of the Irish Daily Mail is José's mauling. Scholes says, sack him. He's embarrassing. And GAA to trial rule changes in 2019 league. Back page of the Irish...
One point, sorry, I missed on Mick Quirk earlier on. He was making the case that the cynical play at the end of a game is not being fixed and not being addressed by this. It's not addressed by the black card, but what would work is what they do in Aussie rules is when you foul inside the last period of time, then the frees get moved forward 50 yards, and that is exactly the type of thing that would prevent the Dubs from doing what they did against Mayo when they pulled everybody down, because suddenly there's a free in midfield and they do it again, there's a kickable free, which maybe Killian O'Connor misses, who knows.
It's at least somebody else getting the digs in on Mayo this morning. Completely needless. On the back page of the Irish Daily Star, it's more misery. United held as Scholes slams José. Luke backs Padraig's Ryder 2020 vision. Axe black card, says Banty. And Declan Rice here. So Paul Lennon had been writing about Declan Rice previously. So he said that he intimated to friends in the week of the Wales game. So he says that it was friends that Declan Rice was speaking to. We weren't quite sure where Paul Lennon was getting his sources. That he was inclined to recommit to the boys in green. However, since then, there has been a suggestion from the FAI to the 19-year-old. There's been no suggestion, rather, that he's ready to recommit to Ireland. So Rice is not expected to be included by O'Neill at lunchtime tomorrow when the Ireland boss confirms his provisional squad for next weekend.
What about the England squads? Obviously, it's too early for him to be included in the England squads, but can he be included in the England under 21 squad? Was there some debate about that?
Like, I need to pull out my FIFA rule book and actually look at the actual stipulations about that. I'm not sure is the honest answer, but he might make, a kind of a pronouncement that...
Also part of our squad, but not legally, is this guy. Come on out, behind door number 1 is Declan Rice, yay!
Yeah, so it seems that I was wrong, Ger. Declan Rice is probably going to play for England.
Can we clip that?
It's the only time I'll ever say it.
The end of that statement is actually, you were right. You didn't get that bit there where I warned you not to get your hopes up. Don't believe these things. There's nothing in life that suggests your dreams will ever come true, Owen.
Back page of the Irish Sun this morning, I should say, is how much more. That was just weird. Scholes can't believe José is not being asked yet to go. I'm kind of like, my character's kind of being broken a small bit. Back page of the Mirror this morning is no more. His mouth is out of control. He's embarrassing the club, and I'm surprised he survived. 3 bullet points there, all from the mouth of Paul Scholes. And the Guardian this morning is Paul Pogba's look of anguish as Mourinho and Pogba united in frustration, and Silva shines at Hoffenheim. Guardiola relieved after City overcome the fear factor.
Okay, so we're going to talk with Daniel Harris in a moment about what happened with Manchester United last night. That doomsday clock has been ticking now for about 6 months. There was some suggestion that maybe actually this would all be okay for a while, but the performance last night, the home performance against...
You said it was going to be okay.
I did, yeah.
You were wrong.
I did. I thought that... I still don't think it's too late for them to go on a run to make this thing last the rest of the season. Like, you can see them getting out of this group still. Like...
We'll know a lot more after the back-to-backs with Juve.
Here's Kenny Cunningham on Roy Keane last night. Have a look.
I don't agree with this kind of immediately zoning in on his creativity. He wasn't the most creative player. Well, no, not in some respects. No, he wasn't. But Paolo Maldini for me was a great player. He wasn't the most creative. He's defending Franco Baresi. These are great players, so we can sometimes get a little bit fixated on the kind of creative. Oh, he wasn't a Glenn Hoddle. No, he wasn't a Glenn Hoddle. No. But Glenn Hoddle couldn't track a runner, couldn't tackle, couldn't see a runner. You know what I mean? Couldn't manage a game out of possession of football like Roy could. Couldn't see the pictures as clearly when he hadn't got the ball as Glenn Hoddle could when he was in possession of the football. So there's a lot of different traits. And Roy could do a lot of everything for me. Roy's early career, box to box, getting ahead of the ball, scoring goals, disciplined himself to play a different role at Manchester United. It's interesting. The amount of time I played with Roy, I don't think I never remember making a pass with the outside of his right foot.
Yeah.
I mean, always received the ball. We're talking about Valencia playing in tight areas of the pitch. Well, Roy would play 5-10 yards outside his penalty box in his tight area. No problem. Give me the ball, half turn, head up, knowing where the next pass was. Always play forward. I remember I was the opposite, sideways and backwards. And I remember constantly Roy, play forward. And he was right, because too often I took the easy option.
It's Kenny Cunningham nailing the Richard Keys bullshit from the weekend about Roy Keane wasn't that good a player anyway, was he? I mean, really? Screw you and your hairy hands, Richard Keys. That's pretty much all I have to say about that. So I think we can move on. I think Daniel Harris is with us this morning. Daniel, good morning to you.
Morning.
You kind of agree with Richard Keys can feck off, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when you hear people talk about Roy Keane, they talk about that he was just a psychopath who did a lot of shouting and a lot of running, but it's bollocks. Roy Keane was one of the greatest passers of the ball I've ever seen. If you look at him, he almost never gave the ball away. Like the group of mates I used to go to United with in those days, we would kind of note it if there'd been a game where we'd seen Roy Keane give the ball away. And he didn't give it away he wasn't not giving it away because he was passing safe. If you ever watch the United treble DVD, where they start showing a season's highlights, but the bit of the goal that they start showing where kind of danger commences and you hear the Jaws music, almost always starts with a Roy Keane pass. A low, hard, intelligent pass fizzed into space that fizzed into feet, that changed the whole tenor of the attack. And he wasn't, as I said, just the bloke who kicked people and ran and got angry and all the rest of it, but he had a brilliant appreciation of space and a brilliant appreciation of angles and of the force at which you could deliver a pass to change the tempo and to change the focus of an attack. And anyone that can't see that is not worth listening to about anything to do with football, and probably anything to do with anything else either. Yeah,
I agree. I think that the other thing that's been good about this conversation coming back to the fore after what happened at the weekend with beIN Sports is that it's clear that there is a complete lack of somebody doing that for Manchester United at the moment in midfield, and it's clear that because you have somebody who's able to do that in the Ferguson era, and because that's what he wants from his midfielders, that there was an identity to the team. There's loads of other reasons why that team had an identity because of the quality of the rest of the team as well, but that's specifically what's missing at the moment from Manchester United, is any sense of identity in that midfield area and what the team are trying to do with their very talented players.
Yeah, I agree. The people that replaced Roy Keane, also, they didn't offer everything that Roy Keane offered, but Michael Carrick offered a different version of that. He would get on the ball and he would pass it forward quickly and accurately off either foot, and that would enable you to attack quickly. Darren Fletcher would get the ball and he would, whatever he did with it, it would be done quickly with urgency. Whereas now everything is done slowly. And you saw the game last night that Pogba, for some reason, I don't know why, I think I read somewhere yesterday, someone saying that Roy Keane was a first half player when the game was in the balance. Pogba is different. He's a second half player. And he actually played, I thought, quite well in the second half. I mean, obviously, all of this is relative. But he was actually the one who was trying to make things happen in the second half. But he didn't have any help. Quite why he's unable so often to get to the tempo of a game until the second half, I'm not quite sure. But it's something that I've noticed now over a course of a couple of seasons. But he was doing his best, but he didn't have enough around him. And I can see why you play Fellaini and Matic together. Well, I can't really see why you play Fellaini and Matic together, but I understand why Mourinho did it against Burnley when he needed a result after 2 bad defeats, and why he did it again against Watford in away games. The ball's going to be in the box a lot and all the rest of it. But I can't envisage a situation in which that isn't getting passed around when you play one of the better Spanish teams in Europe. And that's what we saw yesterday. Like one of them you could perhaps excuse, but sitting there watching it, you also wonder what Mourinho was doing buying Fred, which is you can't expect someone to come in, turn up and be great from the start, and you've obviously got to win your place and all the rest of it, but if you can't get in the team to play against Valencia and Fellaini and Matic are getting picked ahead of you, that to me looks like more a problem with the manager than a problem with Fred himself.
Yeah, look, we've been talking basically since pre-season about how much longer we were going to be part of the José Mourinho era at Manchester United. Now that we've seen the football begin to unfold over the first two months proper of the season, what's the timeline here, Daniel? What do you think is going to happen?
I don't think there is anyone really left or that expects that this is going to get very much better now. Seems to me like, I mean, people suspected since before he came to United that the magic has gone. Even when he was last at Chelsea, he did win the league, but it wasn't a very high standard of league, and he didn't do it with the same kind of enthusiasm, virility that he had done it with previously. And at United, he's done an all right job prior to this season to get them from where they were to where they are, despite the standard of football being way lower than it should be with the players that he's got. But now it's beginning to look like the players have no faith, and it's not acceptable for them to be this clueless after playing for him for so long. And what you see in every game is the focus of what they're meant to be doing changes so that no one has any clue what is actually meant to be happening. So just to give you an example, Alexis Sanchez played on the right last night. Alexis Sanchez, I don't think, has played on the right for United at all since he joined. But when he did join, he was immediately put on the left, when United had 2 players, Martial and Rashford, who were both playing really well on the left. And then Mourinho just immediately put him ahead of them, even though there was a space on the other side. And then those two haven't really been the same since. And then we see finally, a year later almost, Sanchez turns up on the right for one game. And who expects Sanchez to play on the right again in the next game? Not me, not anyone, I don't think. And that's just an example of the muddled thinking. Like what type of team are United? What type of team are United trying to be? I don't think anyone knows the answer to that. I don't think Mourinho knows the answer to that. I don't think he really even cares what the answer to that is. It feels now like we're just waiting for something bad enough to happen for them to shake hands.
I can't quite work out if once the Manchester United job becomes available, whether it's a poison chalice or whether it represents a fantastic opportunity for a manager. Because on the one hand, you can point to the fact that there are some fantastic players drastically underperforming. Like the idea that you pointed there of Carrick and Fletcher being so effective in a role that Paul Pogba, a World Cup winner, is being so ineffective in is laughable, really. But at the same time, do they look at these underperforming players as an awful attitude within the playing group, an unfixably awful attitude, perhaps?
I think that if you consider the United job to be a poison chalice, you're not the right man to have it. I mean, Fergie was very clear about this, that when he turned up, for example, he was kind of daunted by it. Like the stories of he used to go around like muttering to people, big club this, but publicly he would always seek the help of Matt Busby, for example, whereas everyone prior to him had sort of been a bit dwarfed by the presence of Busby. And he would always kind of embrace the history rather than consider it a bit of a problem. I hadn't won the league all this time. Hadn't won the league for a long time before. When he got the job, he would always say, I'm going to try and win the league, rather than be daunted by the fact that hadn't happened. As for the players, if the United were to get a new manager, they're getting an imbalanced squad, but they're getting a squad, as you say, with some good players. It's quite hard to be judgmental when players toss it off to try and get rid of a manager, because we've seen so often players do exactly that. Then as soon as they get a different manager, they turn it back up again. So, and I think that we kind of, as a supporter, you look at it and think supporters deserve better. And even as a writer, I look at it and think supporters deserve better than players not trying. On the other hand, I do understand the mentality of a player who thinks, this is my career, it's a short career, I only get one hit at it. If 4 or 5 weeks of me not trying and my mates not trying is going to get rid of this bloke who's ruining my career, then I'll do that. And if you look at sometimes when managers leave clubs, for example, when Roy Hodgson was at Liverpool, it was obvious that he was the wrong man for that job. So basically, the fans got rid of him. They got getting on his back to the extent that he went eventually because the pressure became too great for the board. Then when David Moyes was at Man United, that was a pretty similar situation, I thought. But the fans didn't get behind. The fans didn't do enough to get rid of David Moyes. So basically, the players took it into their own hands and made sure that he went. So I do understand both sides. On the other hand, you do feel that there should be enough professional pride, because then you think, well, you look, for example, at Mourinho's Chelsea team. When Mourinho got fired, they had Avram Grant bestowed upon them. And because they were a manically driven bunch of proud professionals, they made it work. And they got to the European Cup final. They got within a slip of winning that. They came second in the league with Avram Grant, despite the fact that no one thought Avram Grant had anything to tell them whatsoever, because that's the right way to respect their own talent. I mean, it's a selfish act in the end. I don't think they were doing it for the supporters particularly. They're doing it because that is what they wanted. United doesn't have that kind of professional personalities in the squad, and I think that's part of the problem. Like Pogba keeps getting talked about, but he at least has some competitive charisma. There's not a lot more of that elsewhere in the squad, and that is one aspect of the problem. There's no one who looks to try and grab hold of it when things are going wrong, and any other manager is going to find that and going to probably want to add to it. But at the same time, what you're seeing from United at the moment is about as bad as that group of players are able to deliver. So anyone that did subsequently turn up would probably find things improve significantly quite quickly.
Yeah, like when you look through the squad and you look through the list of players, there's the backbone of a really good team there, and whatever new manager comes in, whatever style of play he wants to have the team embody, then sure, absolutely, he needs to add a few players to make that happen. But like the bones of a really good team are right there, ready to go. So you can imagine some of the best managers in the world want this job. It's just that it's hard to get those in the middle of a season. So if you're Woodward and you're the owners, do you think, okay, well, let's just play this season out now and see where it takes us, and next summer we will re-examine and see who is available and ready to come to us?
No. As Roy Keane once said, the only thing that goes with the flow is a dead fish. And what the problem, you run the risk at the moment. If you, let's say Mourinho continues, you're definitely running a very strong risk of missing fourth. You've got absolutely no chance of doing anything in Europe. And what the real risk, I think, is that players will mentally check out. And then they're not going to know whether Mourinho's staying or going. So then they start to think, well, actually, I want to be somewhere else, start to look at going to other places. So that, let's say someone new were to come in the summer, you don't just have to persuade people to join a club that's not in the European Cup. You're also trying to persuade the guys that you want to keep, not just to stay, but to break off whatever negotiations they're already involved in. I would say that even if it were Carrick to the end of the season, the atmosphere around the club would probably improve. The players would start to enjoy it a bit more. The football would improve. And I don't think that that's the ideal situation. I mean, I think that the problem is that no one above Mourinho knows anything about football. football's not even a priority. Business is a priority, and football is only a priority in as much as it feeds directly into how much money they can make.
Okay.
So I don't think you're going to get an investment in someone who can build something. I don't think they know who Jardim is, who Nagelsmann is, who any of these people are. I think that what you get is the next big name that anyone could think of. It's probably Zidane. I said on Twitter a while ago that United met Zidane in America in the summer. They did. I think Zidane would be a mad choice, but I think that he'd probably be the most likely one.
In the meantime, so you were saying potentially Carrick till the end of the season would actually improve the mood and the atmosphere and the football. The counter argument obviously is that Ryan Giggs came in and the football did not improve. The results actually got worse that time. So there's no guarantee that Carrick would actually be any better than what's happening at the moment.
100%. It might not be better, but the intention, I think, of the team would be better. Because what I'm saying is, in the same with David Moyes and Ryan Giggs, it wasn't possible for things to get very much worse, for them to get any less out of what they had. So it's true, Giggs was only a few games anyway, but I think that just the mood of seeing Ryan Giggs on the touchline felt like people appreciated that. Not for very long, once they started playing football, but there was at least, like, they won his first game 4-0. People kind of quite enjoyed that. I think that it's not quite... so you get Carrick, and I don't think that's what will happen. I don't think it will be Carrick, but I think that with Mourinho, once things start going wrong, it gets quite poisonous quite quickly, and you just don't want that in the club. And so even if the next bloke, the results don't improve, even if the results get worse, you're at least moving on to the next stage. Whereas at the moment, you've got this stasis, basically, not even stasis, you've just got this unpleasant circumstance. And the longer you have an unpleasant circumstance, the more it infects all the other things that are going on. And so I think that you need to stop that. The problem, of course, is that Woodward doesn't know anything about football. He appointed Mourinho, probably doesn't want to have to fire someone else, and also just doesn't seem to be well furnished in the department of testicles. He hung on to Moyes for way longer than he should have done. Van Gaal basically almost like fired himself in December, but hung on until the end of the season. And so he's not... Then Woodward himself stopped Mourinho buying the players that he wanted in the summer and didn't fire him, which is an absolutely ludicrous way to go about things. So he's not someone that can be relied upon to act promptly or act sensibly or act altruistically.
Give me a timeline then. How much longer? End of days here. Are we 40 days? Are we 3 weeks? Are we 2 weeks? Are we next week?
I mean, if they got beaten at home by Newcastle at the weekend, that would look quite bad. But then after that, things start to get a bit more complicated. They're away to Chelsea. Like, part of me feels that he should be made to get a thrashing at Chelsea first before he goes. But then they've got 2 games against Juventus, and those 2 games against Juventus, you're actually starting to get into the point where the season could easily be ruined. If United had won last night, those games against Juventus would matter a bit less. Because if they won last night, then basically a point in either Juventus game or away in Valencia would probably be enough to qualify from the Champions League. But they drew. So they're actually going to need to get something from those Juventus games, and maybe in Spain also. So if you start going towards them with Mourinho, then you're effectively getting in towards Mourinho ruining the season circumstance. And I don't think anyone would want that. And you start getting further off in the league. If they don't beat Newcastle, again, there'll be some more pressure. But from memory, I mean, it seems anyway like there was a lot more pressure on Moyes and Van Gaal for a lot longer before they went. So I don't particularly see that anything is likely to happen in the next couple of weeks, but perhaps I'm wrong.
All right, Daniel, great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
All right, see you again.
Daniel Harris there. You can follow him on Twitter. I didn't realise that they'd actually chatted to Zidane as far back as the summer. And he's available. That's the thing, that at the moment he is available.
Yeah.
There aren't a whole heap of other managers out there who are celebrity and so therefore known by Woodward and also explainable to, you've got the guy who's just won the last bunch of European Cups, to the Glazers. Like, yeah, we got him. Yeah, I mean, he was available for some unknown reason.
What would Roman Abramovich do in a situation is what Edward Word should ask. It's like, in a situation where he stuck Gus Hiddink till the end of the season, I think there is a template there for Manchester United to follow now, where they have a relatively high-profile manager who gives that high profile comes with a sort of form bounce, where you get your squad into a situation where they finish the season with a flourish, and as Daniel says there, they can be in a position to attract new talent to the club once again. Now, the opposite side of the coin of that is Roman Abramovich had no trouble throwing his good friend Avram Grant into the fold. Now, whatever the 2018 version of Avram Grant is, I don't know who it is really, but whoever that person is, do they have the same attractive capabilities to players next summer? I'm not so sure, but then again, Chelsea didn't really have a huge amount of trouble kind of regaining that sort of sense of getting themselves to the top table again.
Yeah, once you got somebody in like Sarri who knows what he's doing and can tell the players, oh, you're a legend, I love you, and I'm going to put you in the right position and I'm going to give you the opportunity to succeed.
Yeah, but this has happened constantly during the Abramovich era, and granted it is a little bit different considering the pool of teams that were able to completely outspend the rest of the continent. It was much smaller back then, and it's kind of inflated now to the point where Manchester United probably don't have that axe to wield where they just kind of outspend a lot of other teams to sort of cover over some of the problems that are going on underneath the surface. But it seems now that there is a realistic possibility that players might turn their nose up at Manchester United next year if the mood gets too sullen. The thing though is, like we've spoken a lot about commercialism and how Ed Woodward cares about the bottom line over the last couple of days. What about the idea of exposure for Manchester United? Do they care about the idea that the most talked about football club in the world right now is Manchester United?
Yes, as a bad thing.
As a good
Are they happy about it?
Like, is there a possibility that they're like, everybody is speaking about us. We are in the limelight consistently, and we have been since the very start of the season. We have arguably the most high-profile manager in the world still in charge of our club. Surely it wouldn't get to that level of commercialism, would it, where they start to think that we are in the limelight constantly. Surely not.
I mean,
embrace the basket case, basically.
Well, as long as it's not a basket case that has any impact on the bottom line in a negative way. As soon as it starts impacting the bottom line in a negative way, the guns get out. So here's the results from last night. We'll show you the results and the forthcoming fixtures. So game week 2, Tuesday. Man City with a late winner from David Silva, 2-1. Lyon and Shakhtar drew 2-2. Juventus hammered Young Boys 3-0 in Manchester United's group. Those back-to-back fixtures against Juve up next. CSKA beat Real Madrid in Moscow by 1-0. Roma beat Pilsen 5-0. Benfica won 3-2 in Greece against AEK. And Ajax managed to draw in Germany against Bayern Munich, which was pretty interesting. Tonight's fixtures, the two early games, PSG against Red Star Belgrade and Lokomotiv Moscow against Schalke. They're the 5:55 fixtures. Napoli and Liverpool kicks off at 8 o'clock. The other big game tonight is Spurs against Barcelona at 8. PSV and Inter, Porto against Galatasaray, Atletico Madrid against Club Brugge, and Dortmund against Monaco. Also an 8 o'clock kickoff tonight. So we'll obviously be talking about the Liverpool game and the Spurs game on tomorrow's show. Now, we're going to move on to some golf. Our RyderCup coverage has been brought to you in association with Now TV. Only pay for the days you want and stream all 10 Sky Sports channels with the Now TV Sky Sports Pass. Padraig Harrington was on last night's Off the Ball. Joe did obviously ask him about the 2020 RyderCup.
Rory has been quick out of the gap to say he'd like to see you lead the team in America. Sergio Garcia, I mean, it's lovely. I saw you two giving each other a big high five at one point. And you're best friends now. It's great.
Well, I won't say we're best friends, but we do get on.
Okay.
And that's what the RyderCup does.
Yeah, well, true. Well, Sergio has come out and said Padraig should lead the team, he thinks, in 2020. Paul McGinley said it on this show last night that, it feels like it's yours if you want it. And a few weeks ago, you kind of said you had your eye on 2020. So, it's an audacious one to go to America because it feels like more and more we're going to see home wins because of everything we've just said about course setups. Any part of you kind of think, geez, I might prefer to take a team at home and be able to shape the course? And, it's a daunting thing. No one wants to be a losing captain.
No one wants to be a losing captain. There's no doubt that you have a better chance at home. You get more involved at home. You have no say when it's away. But saying that, I think the guys in the team would like continuity. I think the vice captains who are there look like they'll be captains and around the team for a while to come. There was a very nice mix, right down to, like, Robert Carlson was brilliant in terms of his diligence in making sure he did a lot of hard work and stats and things like that and made sure we were up to date with all of that.
Right.
Somebody like Robert looks like he could be there forever.
Yeah.
The players really appreciated the vice captain. So I think they're looking for continuity. As regards me going to the States, I think to give the Europeans the best chance it would look like they would line me up for the next one because of my profile in the States.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of me saying, oh, look, I'd like to do it in Europe because I have a better chance of winning.
Yeah.
Overall, Europe have a better chance of winning if I go to the States and somebody else does it in Europe. So for the good of the team, it will probably look like that.
And
saying that,
yeah.
I will say one thing, and this softens it a little bit. Whistling States is where it's going to be in 2020 is a European-style golf course.
Okay.
So they won't be able to get the greens to 14 on the stint measure purely because it's too windy.
Right. Padraig Harrington issues come and get me plea to RyderCup committee. I think it's like fair play. Yeah, I'm the right man for the job. Yes. I mean, I did win multiple majors in the States.
Yeah. It is, well, one major in the States.
Yeah.
It is much easier to kind of stick your neck out when it's a home Ryder Cup, because he was assessing yesterday, like you could captain the Ryder Cup team in Europe and they would win. Whereas to actually do it in the States is clearly a much tougher thing to do. So
screw you all.
It's actually, I could probably do it as well.
It's like 30 years since the Yanks have won, isn't it? Here.
It will be. It'll be 29 come the next one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tough one to actually put your hand up for, but I kind of.
It's not. It's like I want to do the job, and I'm a Ryder Cup legend.
But like, given the age of Padraig Harrington, he could easily have played it cool for another 2 years, and then in 2 years' time said, actually, you know what? I'm going to take this beyond the 29-year gap for a US win. I'm going to hold on to our points at home and all that
3
sort of
decades.
stuff.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that'll be a nice one for whoever gets the one back here. But like, go for it.
Yeah, guaranteed.
It gives your life meaning for the next 2 years.
But that's true. I don't think Padraig Harrington will be struggling for any life meaning. Like, he can still swing his club pretty well. Like, I mean, he was in contention in the tournament just 2 months ago at this point. Like, okay, no, this is a ridiculous notion, but it did just cross my mind there that, say, 2 years ago when we were talking about Tiger Woods in the Ryder Cup, that was like, so does Tiger Woods now become captain, or what's the situation? Like, does Padraig Harrington play his way back into the playing team? It's probably a very different situation, but it did just cross my mind there for 1 sec.
I can't remember who was talking about it on Sunday, but like, is this the end of the Mickelson era? Is this the end of Tiger Woods as a player on the Ryder Cup team? It probably is, right? And which one of those becomes captain in 2 years' time?
Why though? Well, like, why is it the end of the Tiger Woods playing career?
Because he wants to look after his individual playing career. He figures he might have a chance of catching Nicklaus. I mean, I don't think he does. But there's like a selfishness which is clear from the American golfers. So I just want to concentrate on my club career, I believe would be the comparison.
Is there not a chance to sort of cement his greatness further by a great...
No, he hates playing the Ryder Cup. Like, he's also not that good at it.
That will make it it'll make it even more massive.
Phil is now the losingest Ryder Cup player of all time.
But no, I'm not talking about Phil.
I know, but like, Tiger's not far behind him.
Yeah, but
basically, I'm asking: is it not time that we get Tiger Woods in to captain the American Ryder Cup team? Wouldn't that be brilliant?
Tiger versus Harrington would be class.
Yes, come on.
I think it might be 2 years.
You're missing the narrative. No, let's just
screw the narrative.
No.
The reality here is that there's a man here who hates playing the Ryder Cup, and he's got a chance of actually like winning a Ryder Cup, playing great golf. Imagine how good that narrative would be, where he's like, I really hate this tournament, and I played really well.
And so then he gets to be captain for Europe, coming over to Europe and losing, and then being the loser who is like 3 decades of losing heaped onto Tiger's shoulders. No, thanks. I'm going to be captain of Whistling Straits. Yeah,
give him 6 years.
The Europeans are already talking up. The Europeans are already talking up their chances of winning here because we can't get it to the sit meter. That's a challenge. We'll have the hairdryers out the night before, making sure that it's like bikini wax.
Yeah, maybe. No, it's certainly,
yes,
it's certainly my take on it. It's like, why are we talking about Tiger Woods winning multiple majors next year if we can't envisage him playing in the Ryder Cup 12 months after that?
He doesn't want to play in the Ryder Cup. He wants to win majors. That's all it is.
This is golf. You get coerced into playing the Ryder Cup if you're playing good golf. He could qualify automatically for that US team in the year 2020. That is a realistic possibility.
Yeah, it is. But like...
So if he gets an automatic place, he's just going to be like...
I'm the captain and I'm non-playing. That's what I'm saying. We should start the campaign to get him to be captain against Padraig Harrington now.
But people will say your back is going to be bad enough for the rest of your life, Tiger. There'll be plenty of times to go around on whatever, a scooter around.
There'll be someone to wheel you around.
Yeah.
Oh, hello. How are you?
Yeah, like that's exactly, I think, how we all picture Tiger Woods captaining the US team.
All right, so let's move on. We want you to have a look at this. Longwood and Mickey Burke won the Meath Intermediate Football Championship at the weekend. Congratulations. So they're going to be senior next year. Their celebrations took an interesting turn.
All right, Poochie, we haven't started yet. I think we're on the winner here, Poochie. I think we're on the winner here. Nice and easy, son. Nice and easy. Drink up, Poochie, drink up, we're leaving.
Ham dram all around you, and the clothes and all. They came prepared for victory.
Was he not wearing a hat in that scene, Del Boy?
I mean, I don't know.
Oh, right.
I mean, who cares?
Well, you mentioned the outfit. You mentioned the outfit.
It was not bad. Jesus.
I like to get
You're a critic on.
Everything else was so spot on that I just thought Del Boy was wearing a hat.
Okay. That's the one thing that you should take away from that. Fair play to Mickey Burke and his sidekick, who doesn't even get a name in this. His Longwood teammate, I believe. So there you go. Ryan Moore, like the jockey. Okay, he's a centre forward in the team, I'm told, by our resident. They hammered Meath Hill in the championship. So fair play. And fair play for sharing the video. I think that the celebration videos is now, it's like from the dressing room listening to bad 80s tunes has suddenly celebration videos have leaped a little bit. What's next?
Like what other classic scenes do we need to recreate? Like the closing scene from The Sopranos next from a county championship winner?
Well, that's just a diner.
Bit intense, though.
Yeah, that would be.
The diner in Fade to Black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it, it's not very good.
Well, it's iconic.
Screw you, Owen. Breaking news. No hat for Del Boy in the clip.
My word.
Well, it doesn't matter, does
Screw
it?
you.
It doesn't matter.
No, you're like look at me and my facts, and then they're wrong. Anyway, Darren, how are you?
Good morning, Ger. I'm very well this morning, but the Manchester United fan in your life, not so well after last night. Meanwhile, José Mourinho has refused to be drawn into a war of words with Paul Scholes. The United legend was critical of Mourinho, saying that he has embarrassed the club. United have had their worst start to a season for 29 years and have now gone 4 matches without a victory. This is what Scholes had to say.
I'm actually sat here surprised that he survived after Saturday. The performance was that bad. Attitude and performance, it just wasn't nowhere near. And he's coming out in press conferences, he's constantly having a go at players. He's having a go at people above him because he's not getting what he wants. And I think his mouth is probably out of control, and I think he's embarrassing the club.
I don't need to know what he said.
Yeah.
No.
He said you're embarrassing the club, Joe.
No, he says what he wants to say.
Or it is.
I'm not interested.
You don't think he's crossing the line with what he's
I'm not interested. Honestly, I'm not interested. Freedom of speech. Free country. You can say what you want.
Now, Steve Bruce, not a happy man this morning. He's under pressure and he was the subject of an unusual protest last night. He had a cabbage thrown at him by a disgruntled fan during the 3-3 championship draw at home to Preston. Some fans also called for Bruce to be sacked during the match at Villa Park. He told the BBC, "What I witnessed in the stadium was not right. The guy who is being questioned, unfortunately, it sums up the society we are in at the moment. There's no respect for anyone. I find the whole thing, the cabbage incident, hugely disrespectful," Bruce said.
It's a disgusting act, isn't it?
Cabbages. It's terrible. Not even a pig's head.
I mean, it's not great if you want to actually get it near Bruce.
It's very heavy.
Yeah.
They're really heavy, yeah.
You're not going to get much flight in a cabbage.
Although if it did hit you, you'd take the head off you.
Yeah, you'd notice it.
So the thing about the pig's head is the actual real original pig's head in the Classico was like a tiny little couchon. Tiny little pig's head. The ones that they brought to the stadium here in Dalymount was like a giant full-on like sow's head that you had to heave onto the pitch.
The little piglet's head though is more grim, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's like, at least you can get a bit of purchase on that.
Is there like a safety procedure at Villa Park for stopping cabbages coming into the stadium?
They're going to have to like do full body scans.
Or do they like open the bag and it's like, well,
How
fair
do you
enough,
get a cabbage into a stadium?
Presumably in
very pregnant.
a carrier bag.
Pregnant, I think.
Like, I'm sure
You sound like you know an awful lot about this protest, Joe.
Look, I was thinking about this, right? Having shit managers at your club is the fastest way to fall out of love of football. It was when they appointed David O'Leary that I stopped loving football properly. It's all the fault of Aston Villa that you appoint crap managers. There's nothing worse than having a crap manager at your club. And Steve Bruce, I'm sorry, I understand he's had a difficult period over the last 18 months, but like, sling your hook, buddy. Sling your hook.
So everybody who, like, what if you have a good manager who's losing games?
But you got a good manager.
It's hard to separate those two things, though, isn't it?
When was the last time you had a good manager losing games?
Well, somebody has to.
Like, is José Mourinho a good manager now? I mean, he's not anymore. He was for a long time, but he's not anymore.
His record would suggest he's the best manager in the world.
Well, he was a very good, amazing, innovative manager for a period of time, and then he dined out on that, and now he's not.
And continued to dine out on it, and continued to dine out on it, and it's still doing it.
Let's bring you the rest of the championship results. Leeds have reclaimed top spot in that division following a 1-0 win away to Hull. Middlesbrough are in second after winning 2-0 at Ipswich. There is the rest of the results as well on screen for you. We move on to the rugby now as well, and Joe Marler will not face any disciplinary action from the English Rugby Union over his claims that he would deliberately get suspended to avoid playing for England. Reports today suggest Marler was contacted by the RFU for clarification over remarks made on a podcast, but that the matter will not be taken any further. The 28-year-old announced the surprise international retirement last week, less than 12 months before the Rugby World Cup. He took to Twitter, these are his tweets. He claims he was taken out of context. He says, "I would like to clarify my comments this morning that have been taken out of context. I have never deliberately done anything on a rugby pitch or off it to get a ban. I was simply reflecting on my occasional irrational behaviour when England camps were looming and trying to understand my actions a little bit better." Now, Marler's claims that he was taken out of context are a little bit hard to believe when you actually see what he said. Make your own mind up.
Yeah, I'm talking quite honestly and frankly. I don't want to give too much, but the sort of anxiety I would get about having to leave and go away again would start to manifest itself in giving away even more dull penalties and looking for outs, looking for a yellow card, looking for a red card.
Oh, really?
Because if I could pick up a ban, then that's an easy way out, isn't it? Without actually pulling the trigger.
Not great. You kind of just want to. And so, why did you do that? Was the follow-up question that I didn't hear being asked.
Yeah, I don't think it was really asked. But the claims that it was taken out of context, it's very hard to take out of context when he said, "I would deliberately get yellow and red cards." Was
he doing it? Was the anxiety about leaving his family and leaving home, or was it about playing for Eddie Jones? Was it about playing for England? Like that's the bit where there's some wiggle room for the context. Is that I hated playing for England, or I hated being away, and like. Is it a mental health issue, or is it like just I hated playing for England? Because I don't know.
It would appear there was more unsaid than said in that interview.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
Well, in golf, Brooks Koepka says he's heartbroken after it emerged that a spectator struck in the eye by his tee shot during last week's RyderCup. One of them could lose sight in that eye. Karine Ramande smacked by a wayward shot on the par 4 sixth hole during the first stage of play at Le Golf National in Paris. Doctors say she suffered the fracture of the right eye socket and an explosion of the eyeball. Koepka said in a statement on Twitter that he was deeply hurt and saddened by what he described as a tragic incident.
That was your statement. You done?
That's me.
All right. Another cheery end to the news bulletin today. OTB AM is live with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. Are we doing Kenny Cunningham now, or we do that? No, okay, we'll do that a little bit later. We're going to talk now about the Gaelic football rule changes, and I'm delighted to say we've got Enda McGinley on the line and Anthony Moyles on Skype as well. Anthony, I might start with you. One of the things that we've been asked to do is to consider these rule changes as a whole, as opposed to breaking them down as individuals, so that, you know, you might have an issue with one or two of them, but let's see how they all work in concert together. Is that a fair enough request from the Standing Rules Committee?
I don't think so, Darren, no. I just kind of, look, I can see why people would feel the requirement or the need to try to do stuff and to try to change things. But at the same time, you know, I'd be, you know, there's a number of people who are really clamoring for this, you know, and there's probably a number of high profile people who are kind of saying, you know, oh, change needs to come. And you know, for me, these short-term fixes, these kind of quick fixes, shall we say, are sometimes, you know, it's all this kind of stuff of the unknown consequences, what actually can happen after it. Like, I mean, you look at most sports, be it soccer, rugby, etc., basketball, NFL, yes, there's changes that go on, but they are really, really, really well thought through. They don't fundamentally change the basic kind of requirements or skills of the game. And they might be just tinkering around the edge with certain things. Whereas, it's really like every year, especially football, it's like, okay, we just have to bring in something really radical here, and we have to nearly react, to certain things that are going on, or certain things that are being said in the media, or certain things that are being said in punditry, or whatever it is. And it's sometimes I'm more worried about that aspect of it than anything else, in that it's kind of very reactionary rather than kind of sitting down. And I know they're trying to get ahead of the game here, but some of this isn't new. The sin bin has been there. I think I played in O'Byrne Cup, I think in 04-05, and the sin bin was trialled. And then you also have a situation, obviously, where I would find that the other things that are being asked to be brought in, that some of them will actually may even make the strong even stronger. So I think there has to be a question of, well, what is the reason for this? Is the reason to try to level the playing field? Is the reason to try and make the game more attractive? Or is the reason to get more competition, say, within the game, and actually not have these one-sided games? And to be honest with you, changing any amount of rules, bar you go out and you play Dublin with 12 players and the rest of the country with 15 players, nothing's really going to change there. All the standards have to be raised, which everyone knows about, and it's incumbent then on managers, it's incumbent on club coaches, it's incumbent on players themselves to realise that actually the levels that we need to get to are being set by the likes of Dublin, and it's not going to happen today or tomorrow, but it may happen over the next kind of 5 years, 10 years. And to be fair, the likes of Tyrone, the likes of Galway, the likes of Kerry, the likes of even Kildare, and hopefully Meath, and they've realised this the last number of years, and they are trying their best to get to those levels.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it there, and I was going to kind of ask just before we get into the rule changes about what the GAA is reacting to. You mentioned Dublin there. Do you really think that is the single biggest reason why these rule changes have been proposed, that they've just seen a team do 4 in a row and they're therefore being reactionary on that level? It just seems very knee-jerk, Anthony.
I think as well, Owen, you have a situation, say, the coverage that came out there a couple of weeks ago with Slot Neal, and people see that and they're like, oh, that's an absolute joke. But maybe there's been many instances out in club games, but I go to a lot of club games here in Meath, and if you play with 14 men behind the ball, you generally get bet. And I don't think you'd last too long as a manager in a club with a bunch of players who are saying, I'm delighted to go down training for the whole year to end up playing in this type of system where we're keeping the score down to 7 points to 6 or something like that. That's not what the game is about. And you eventually get found out playing that. Even Jim McGuinness was found out, to be fair. Dublin decided and thought of a way that they could get around that, and they did. So, you have to, every game will have something where people say, you take rugby a couple of years ago, it was all about, the up and under. So scrum halves would get it, to kick it up in the air, the opposition guys would catch it, they'd kick it up in the air, and it was all about trying to get this kind of, territory. But then fellas realised, actually, this is just a bit of a waste of time, it's more of a lottery, so we'll actually attack players and we'll offload. So games do move, and I think that the game itself moves. I don't think necessarily as a rule change or as changing the rules, you have to say, okay, well, we alter the rules and therefore we will alter the game. Yeah. I think people will have to say, okay, this guy is bringing something new to me. So what did Jim McGuinness bring? Okay, a packed defence. Well, how do we actually draw that defence out? How do we beat that defence? Whatever it is. So I just think I don't think it's reactionary really on just to Dublin. I think it's reactionary to a number of people getting on saying, oh, hurling is fantastic, look at the excitement, blah, 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 blah. And listen, let's not even go there. There's plenty of bad hurling games. It's all about football, and the football is dying on its feet. And, I disagree.
And what's your take on this?
Yeah, there's a lot of truth in what Anthony's saying. I think the reactionary thing, I think the biggest thing that usually kicks the GAA into action, unfortunately, is fall in interest and fall in money coming in through the gates. And I think that was borne out this year. I think that is a two-pronged thing. I think the almost inevitability of Dublin's progress through a lot of the games, and then the general quality of fare. I think the football has been poor. I was always a great believer in that it would evolve. This last while I've sort of started to lose faith in that belief, because I think the defensive, that blanket defence is such an effective tactic that I don't see a particular reason for teams to go against it. I think the best teams are working with it. They're still getting, including Dublin, they're still getting multiple players behind the ball and then looking to break. The best teams are getting a finer balance within that. But I think that blanket defensive type thing and the football we see because of that, the static sort of soloing across midfield, the no pressure on people in the middle third at times whenever a team's all back, I think that is becoming a more of a feature of the game. Now, Tyrone changed it up towards the latter end of the year and went more man-to-man, so if more teams do that, maybe there's still time for the natural evolution to occur, but I think Croke Park are feeling under pressure to come out and do something, and this is their attempt. I'd agree, you were asking Anthony there regarding to consider all these rules as one go. I'd be really worried about that. The last sort of sudden rule change we've seen was the black card, and I think very few would think that it was fully thought through, and the consequences and the knock-on effects of it was fully thought through. I think absolutely the same here again. Like, you could pick holes, and I suppose that's the GAA attitude. It's very easy to pick holes in every single one of them rule changes. I think for me, you have to believe that the committee are true Gaels behind it all, and they're working in the best interest of the sport, and they have taken lots of direction in terms of these. But I would just worry that some of the rules, the specifics of some of the rules, will have a knock-on effect and could end up more negative, such as the fist passing, such as the only a forward pass from the sideline ball, or such as the forward mark. All of them, potentially as managers, you actually switch around to strengthening the argument for more defensive football. So I think we'll have to be very careful. We changed one rule with the black card, and I didn't think it was particularly great. To change 5 and 6 rules like this would be a big step.
Is there at least a case for them to do this in a year with the league and see what happens? And obviously we will go back to the normal rules of the championship no matter what happens, because there's been no congress to change those rules. So that we could examine. Look, I see the point you're making. If the only being allowed to kick a sideline ball forward means that defenders can funnel back, knowing full well that whoever has the sideline ball has to kick the ball forward, and so suddenly the defending team has one more man to defend than the sideline team, because there's a man off the field kicking it. The other stuff about like the men inside the 45. That means everybody just bunches up at the 45, and it becomes a little bit like an under-6s or an under-8s match where everybody's just chasing the ball. Like you can see ways where this all falls down in practice, but we've got to try something, to your point, about the quality of fare not improving, and also the defensive structures really being so dominant at the moment.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I suppose on one half I'm delighted to see that there is definite moves afoot to try something different. I suppose there will be some that will be said just leave it alone and give it time, but I suppose I was in that camp, and my question is, how much time do we give it? Because the football has probably been poorer this year than we've seen in a long time. Maybe that's just a one-off year. I would agree with the hurling thing. We're looking at hurling a wee bit too much, and in fairness, when you look at the rules, an awful lot of them seems to be trying to create a hurling game out of a football game, a big kick out into the middle, and then from there, big kick out into the full forward line. So I think we'll have to be cautious about that. But I think at least it's going to start a pretty earnest discussion. I think it's going to go out, obviously, to consultation now. I can't see all these rules being passed. If all them rules come in, I think watching the National League, how and on the God do you try to make sense of what rules is working, what rules aren't working, because the teams themselves are only getting onto them too. Like county teams, the way they're trained at the minute, would need 2 and 3 years working with a particular big rule change to try and see what the eventual sort of outcome of that is. To change 5 rules in the one National League and expect to see some sort of an outcome and some sort of a conclusion after 7 games, I think is rubbish, when teams are still primarily targeting promotion or relegation. So there's no point bringing in big rule changes but kicking them all out after one National League. I think we need to look at things a wee bit more, a wee bit closer, and give things a wee bit longer.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. One last question to you, and I know you've got to go in just a second. Is of the rules, of the 5 rule changes, which is the one that you'd have your biggest concerns about?
The fist passing one has always irked me. I cannot understand it. Limiting to 3 fist passes, I think people say, it's a hand pass game rather than a fist pass game, but I played in loads of great games of football. I watched loads and loads of great games of football. All of them brilliant games of football that any of us that follows the game will remember. Fist passing had nothing to do with it. You know, I think if even say last year's All-Ireland final, was anybody counting fist passes? It was a brilliant game of football. Think of any of them great classics down over the years that we all recall. Was any of us counting fist passes? No. So I think that's the fist passing is only a consequence of the blanket defence. I'm not sure any of these rule changes actually addresses the blanket defence.
Yeah, all right, and the great stuff. We'll let you go. Thanks a million. Anthony, anything different from that in terms of the whole notion of bringing 5 changes in for a league campaign when you know that managers are cycling through their squads, in some instances desperately trying to get promotion or keep a job, in other instances that really you would need 2 championship years of evidence to see whether or not a rule change has had any impact?
Yeah, and I think, Gerard, it just adds an awful lot of pressure, never mind even the actual adherence of the rules, right? So actually the referees, you know, and the observation of the rules. Like, I mean, we see the mess that the black card has created in various different guises and various different things. You go to club games and fellas are being roaring, black card for that, black card for this. You have it on the pitch with players, you have it on managers, you have it on sidelines. So you can imagine then that a referee is there pretty much, okay, you know, they say they're getting a lot more help from linesmen and from umpires, but let's say they're pretty much on their own and they're trying to have to now observe all this other stuff that's going on and the amount of hand pads. There's just going to be error, I think, upon error upon error. I think the way to try to generate this is you nearly try to have to start to simplify things. Like, you know, football was pretty dire at certain parts of my career when it was just catch and kick. You know, you'd hear fellas who go on to TG Carr and watch some of the games during the 70s and the 80s and they're just like, oh my Jesus, what was that? You know, fellas just getting the ball and hoofing it for as long as they can, or as far as they can. So sometimes there is a demand, and I don't know if it's an insatiable type of appetite that we have at the moment where everything is clips and everything is short streaming stuff. So, you know, you look at a game of soccer and you see 10 highlights, which look fantastic. But if you're sitting there for the 90 minutes, you might be, you know, boring a hole in your head watching the thing because it might be an absolutely terrible game. So everything has kind of become this instant gratification. And I'm not trying to say that Gaelic football does not need help, but there is, I think, an awful lot of focus on it. And, you know, even, you know, you just say there, you know, it's been a poor season. Like, I've gone to a fair few games this year and I've really, really enjoyed them. And I think sometimes, you know, I think there's 3 things that a team has to have. And if you look at Dublin, you know, physically they are probably the most prime team in the country, right? Regardless now of, you know, funding and all this, let's just look at the facts where they are at the moment. So physically they are the fittest, the strongest, the most conditioned, etc. Skill-wise, they're probably the best in the country as well, right? So they're skillfully the best. They can execute the ball skills and whatever they need to do better than any other team on a more consistent fashion. And tactically, they are more astute than any other team in the country. So Jim Gavin and his backroom team will look at an opposition team, will look at the way a team are playing, and they will set up and they will alter during the game. You know, we've spoken about this. Jason Sherlock running out after 15 minutes of a game, telling Cluxton to alter kickouts, telling the forwards to push up or drop off, whatever it is. So they're the nuances that happen within the game. Now, the rest of the country then, you know, Mayo, whoever else, they have to first of all get to number 1 and 2, which is you have to be physically able to beat them and stay with them. How many times in the 2000s or the late 2000s you heard teams saying, oh, well, they weren't fit enough and Dublin just blew them away in the last 10 minutes. You don't hear that anymore. Teams have to develop panels that are not just 15, 16, 17 lads. They have to be 24, 25 lads who are capable of playing in that cauldron against Dublin. Then you move on abilities and skill and everything else and honing in on that, because obviously if you're playing county football, you have a level of skill. And then the last one, which is the big one, is tactically, how do I beat them? And you see with Mickey Hart this year, you know, he started to press them from both sides, both the defenders pressing up against them and the forwards pressing in against them. So to stop this lateral movement of the ball, they tried to squeeze and press that area. Now, that is a brilliant move. It's a basketball move, but it's a brilliant move to try and all of a sudden break that down. So that's just a guy thinking. It's not a rule change. It's not someone saying, oh, no, we can't go back with the ball. It's just somebody saying, actually, this is how I'm going to get the ball back. And this is how I'm going to apply pressure, as Enda says, one-on-one. Now, unfortunately, unfortunately for Dublin, there are not that many counties who are able to match them on all of that. So what do most management teams do? They say, okay, well, we can't get number 1 and number 2 up to the level of Dublin, so we get number 3. And number 3 is tactically, how do we set up? And the answer is, you just park the bus. It's happened in soccer for years. It's even happened in, defensive-wise in rugby for years. So you just park the bus and you say, we keep the score down, and hopefully, we get a bit of luck and we'll pick them off. So Jesus, Jack Charlton did it for donkey's years with us, and we all heralded that stuff. So, so it's look, I can see why people are trying to change. I can see why, incremental change. But I'm worried. I think the game is suffering from a lot bigger issues than just rule changes. Like, let's not even start the fixture stuff.
Well, I think actually it's worth pointing that out. And it was a point that Mick Quirk made in a kind of smaller example in his piece in the Examiner today, when he said that this is addressing the symptoms. This is not addressing the symptoms. This is addressing the symptoms, but not the cause of the issue. When he was talking about the hand passing, but specifically the notion of changing the rules to make the game better, like. The issue is the broken fixture list. The issue is the inequalities within the system, where Leitrim and Dublin are playing in the same championship and the game is the same game for those two teams. And the expectation is that somehow we have a championship and a league that puts teams up against each other in fixtures that don't make any sense. Like, if you put the teams up against each other who had the same level of resources and the same level of tradition and the same level of talent coming through, the game is actually really good in those games. The Division 3 matches where the two teams are fairly similar, the Division 2 matches in the league where the two teams are fairly similar, those matches were really good. There was a score in them, like at various stages. The quality of football was excellent when both teams tried to win the matches. It's when you have this imbalance where there is like one of the best club teams in the country against a team who is going to get hammered by them if they go out. That's when you see what you got in the Slot Neal game.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is, Ger, you don't hear much of this clamouring going on after the league or even during the league. People were very happy of the league the last few years because, as you say, you've like versus like. You don't have a situation where you've got the behemoth versus this and they're just knocking the living daylights out of people. So, that is where this is exactly, it's trying to, you're tinkering around the edge with this, where actually the core of football is rotten. And it's rotten all the way down to the club game. The GAA authorities, you talk about hurling and all, there's great, fantastic games in hurling. There's not that many fantastic games in hurling in April, May, when they play off the old, whatever it's called now, the Christie Ring or whatever, and they get a bit of lesser teams. And next thing, they have all the big names and everyone focuses on the big names. And of course there's going to be good names because most of them are at a level. They're pretty close. So there's excitement, there's close matches, all the rest of that stuff, because it's pretty much, as I say, both of them are pretty close. Most teams are pretty close at that stage. But if you have a situation, as you say, fixture lists, don't even get me started with all that stuff. So you have drop-off, you have, guys deciding that actually this isn't for me. You have all those different things. And then you go up into the inter-county scene and you have teams that are, as you say, playing way out above their league in the championship with nothing to play for. Sure, this kind of stuff is going to happen. You're going to get one-sided games. You're going to get, a position where teams and guys are saying, sure, what am I playing the game for? Like, where is the potential that I can actually, win something or I can actually achieve with this? So that stuff, that's for me. That's what has to be focused on. And I think this is a kind of a bit of a sideshow going on here. This is what has to be fixed. And we're still waiting, by the way. We are still waiting. Like the CPA there, and I'm not, I don't come on just to keep, but we asked for, and we were brought in, everyone to sit down, vested interest, sit down, let's, get a blank sheet, and let's look at this thing from top to bottom, and let's get the season sorted out. Let's allow, areas where clubs can then go, okay, now we can know what we need to do. And let's actually start to enhance the game. And let's start to get kids and everyone else enjoying the game. And guys of 19, 20, 21, 22 that they want to play till they're 35, not deciding at 21 or 20, actually, I've had enough of this and I'm going off and playing social soccer or social rugby or whatever it is.
Yeah, fair enough. Anthony, great stuff. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, cheers, lads.
Anthony Moyles there.
Yeah, it's so true when you say that this... isn't the main issue. I do think that rule change is required on some level, and it may be a future direction to go. But ultimately, you look at just
on that. I think rule change is always in every sport. You should have a standing rules committee who every year are going, what happened? How did this work? Let's experiment with this. This is like in all sports, you're constantly evolving the rules. But the notion that this is somehow going to fix the tyranny of defensive football that we're struggling with at the moment, it just doesn't make any sense.
It's always, I don't want to use the term always, but for the most part, when you talk about that mass defence or these really dour attempts trying to win a game, it is always a team trying to play up to the opposition that is clearly far superior. You look at the great games this summer, like Roscommon Armagh, arguably game of the year because two teams were of a similar level. Even the games that wouldn't be construed as classics, far from classic, the likes of, let's say...
Leitrim in New York.
Well, that's a good point, but like Tyrone against Dublin, Tyrone against Donegal, even Monaghan against Kildare in Croke Park were, I think, enjoyable games.
Totally acceptable level of...
exactly. And
going for it.
That would be what I would consider to be the target average for a game, but in the context of the season just gone by, they're probably far above the average in terms of the quality of spectacle, and there is only one reason why that average is so low, and it is because teams are going to get walloped unless they play in a certain way, and even when they do play in that certain way, they still get walloped. It just doesn't look as dramatic.
Yeah, I think it might look worse. There is, so the law of unintended consequences is hugely important. What you might now be able to do is find a goalkeeper who can welly the ball, or somebody in your full back line who can welly the ball, two tall midfielders who can catch the ball, two tall inside forwards who can catch the ball, and suddenly you have a team. Like, ping. Is this really what we want?
Just to get into the nitty-gritty of it, what you said earlier on is actually kind of true, that you line up your players, you line them up in the 45, and while the ball's in the air, you manage to gather in the middle of the field, and maybe the two midfielders won't actually cause that much of an influence.
Well, so just about the kick out and the zoning is mad complicated, right? For a kick out, two players only from each team shall be positioned between the two 45-metre lines. The goalkeeper and a maximum of 6 players from each team shall be behind the respective 45-metre lines. A maximum of 6 players shall be behind. Okay. Well, so...
It can only be 6, because it has to be 6 at the other end of the other 45.
So there's no minimum... okay, Grant. Unless... Can you be off the pitch and run on?
I don't know. I certainly don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, so there's 2 polls running on Facebook and Twitter. Would you go for any of these rule changes? Suggested rule changes: hand pass restriction 21%, kick out zoning 17%, the mark for the attacking players 31%, and the sin bin 31%. So, would you go for any of the proposed GAA rule changes? On Twitter it was OTB AM live right now. The attacking mark 32%, 35% the sin bin, 10% zonal kickouts, 23% restricting hand passes. Part of me always feels like as well that like the committee are dyed-in-the-wool GAA men. They know exactly what's going on here, right? So you bring all these in, you start the debate, and you get 1 or 2 through. I don't know which of the 1 or 2 that, like, which one's the Trojan horse for everything else?
Well, that's the thing. Also, another problem I have, just with regards to the conversation we just had, these are going to be trialled in league games where everybody's of a similar standard. There is a very big danger that they're trialled in the league, and it's like, all those games were really good and it was a decent spectacle. It's because it's the league and it's the best competition we have in Gaelic football.
Yeah. Pat Gallagher on Twitter says, can somebody explain how restricting the number of hand passes helps the game? It won't stop the over and back pitch stuff, as it will be easy to kick past doing this. It's going to stop free-flowing attacks when teams run the ball at speed through the hands. It's a stupid idea.
Kick the ball backwards as well.
Yeah. In order here, Juan José on YouTube says, were there any current players, managers, referees on the panel that devised the list of potential changes? There were. You've got the list of the committee there, and it's like, in fairness, it's a really good committee of committed GAA people.
Yeah, it is. I may as well just read out the list of people for anybody who missed it. It's David Hassan is the chair, Tracy Bunning is the secretary, and then the other members are Pat Daly, Seamus Kenny, Brian Cuthbert, Michael Delaney, David Collins, Alex McQuillan and Frank Murphy. So varying degrees of people involved with county boards, former coaches, GPA.
GAA.
So there is a well-rounded thing. Of course, the intentions are good in this. There's no question about it.
Deller Beller says, forget the sin bin, just award a 13-metre free for yellow and black cards regardless of where the foul takes place. I absolutely agree with that. That changes the game completely. that there's a 30-metre free every time a yellow card or black card offence is committed.
Yeah, it does. It's one of a number of... It's
free throws in basketball, and it stops fouling, and it makes the game even. It gets rid of all the nastiness. It gets rid of the jawing and the gouging and the jersey pulling. It's like, no, I saw that. That's a yellow card off. That's a yellow card and a 30-metre free. It transforms the sport immediately, I think.
It does. It does transform the sport. It doesn't mean it's the right idea.
Why not? What's wrong with it, though?
Is it too punitive?
Why? Like, if you...
over a yellow card that maybe isn't deliberate. Granted, there's only going to be whatever 6 or 7 yellow cards per team in a match. It's not going to...
Well, let's make yellow cards for deliberate or reckless fouls. Like, you can change what becomes a yellow card. So a black card's fairly obvious. That's a free. Maybe it's just for black cards. Maybe yellow cards. But like, at some level, deciding that your foul cost your team a score changes the complexion entirely. I think.
Yeah, no, it's true. There is certainly a very big argument to implement something like that, where you're bringing the ball up a huge portion of the field. Whether or not it's for all black and yellows, I'm not sure. Definitely for a black, I would think, would be the correct call.
You could trial it with the black and then see if you move it to yellow. Listening from Australia, the AFL are going to love these rules, says Hugo Fallon. I mean, it's true. Suddenly there will be players used to, like, conditioned from the time that they're 15 to be high fielders, catchers, markers and kickers. It's like, oh, you're deciding that this is going to be an entire academy system for our professional sport over here in Australia. Thanks very much, lads.
Yeah, it certainly could be. Like, are people not trained that way anyway? Like, we're not training.
Not really.
We're not training kids into a system.
Well, you would be. Like, if it's like catch, kick. I mean, at what point also does then anybody under 5'11", 6'1" stop being useful to you? Do you just decide, right, you can't be a defender because you're marking guys that are too big? You can only play in the half-back and half-forward line, but actually even then you're kind of useless to us?
I think you're overplaying the whole zonal formation of the kickouts a little bit.
I don't think so. I think it's a mad constellation. So how many kickouts are there in a game? Is it 20 odd?
I would say over 20. Yeah.
So that's 40, 20 for each team. So that's 40 times a match. Everybody goes into formation and then punches out.
Yeah, like the idea that all these balls are going to be caught clean
becomes a bit of a ballet.
Yeah, but
they won't all be caught clean. Fair enough.
Well, the thing is with the zone formation, it's actually limiting the amount of places that the kick out can go. It's limiting into this very small. In a lot of cases, let's say it's senior club football, it's going to be between the 45-metre line and the halfway line. That's where it's going to be.
Yeah.
No, therefore, you're bunching things even more. Like, the ball is in the air, everybody's running into this little zone. There's going to be tons more breaks, perhaps, than there ordinarily would be, because there is no breaks with short kickouts. So the little man is survives in that. The Paul Galvin would thrive in this environment.
Yeah, I mean, he's not little. Like
he's not Kieran Donaghy either. You were saying everybody has to be 6'2", primed for the AFL.
So, I don't know, I just think it was like, even the way that the Galway hurling team have evolved to like, everybody's 6'4", like it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm just suggesting that there's an unintended consequence there where there's a massive premium now on those tall players who can catch the ball. Massive premium.
Yeah.
Especially if you can play in the full forward line, because...
Does Owen Merchant last in the Dublin full back line under these rules?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't think so. Because you will now have, like, if Aidan O'Shea is coming up now, he is probably in the full forward line, because every time he catches the ball, it's a score.
Yeah. The RLC, if you've got an extreme version of Aidan O'Shea, he's going up for a few kickouts, and he doesn't even negotiate the two areas between the 45 and the 20.
You're never there. You're like in midfield.
Or in the full forward line, whatever.
And 40 times a match, that's useful to you. So, like, of course you're going to do that.
There's truth in what you're saying, for sure. I do think that the idea that it's going to lead to a lot more clean catching and stuff, I'd like to see it in practice first.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think in my own head, how quickly can players bunch from a position outside of a zone with which you're not allowed to enter at a certain point.
But they're lined up on the line.
And
as soon as the ball is kicked,
they're bunching. It's very hard to catch a clean ball in a bunched area like that, is what I'm saying.
The hand pass restriction won't work. A man's on into space with a soft hand pass. Sorry, they could start by properly defining the tackle, says Virginia, which is a good point. It's all about restricting Dublin rather than eliminating defensive play, says how's that?
I really hope that's surely not the motive behind it.
I don't
really
know.
hope
I
it's
think
not.
that people's issues. I think that all of this comes down to the crappy championship structures that we have that have allowed one team to be so much better than everybody else, and the other teams have designed defensive structures to try and beat that team.
Yes.
And that's been copied by the rest of the system because they see it on TV and they see it being successful. And the problem is that you have this structure which is completely lopsided. Like, you can't bring a gun to a knife fight, and every county in the championship that's playing a first division team that isn't a first or second division team is going in completely unprotected by the system. So of course you're going to build a defensive structure that allows you to somehow retain some semblance of credibility when you go back in there. Any of those teams who come out, oh, we're not going to change our style of play just because we're playing Dublin, it's like, well, 7-23 to no score. Well done, lads, congratulations.
So do you think that instead, and to be honest with you, I'm not asking this to sort of kind of like sarcastically or anything, because part of me agrees with this. Do you think that we should then be making these radical changes, but on a structural point of view in terms of championship structures, that if they're able to say, here are 5 crazy things, people want radical change, and I like that way of thinking, but should they be thinking in terms of structure? Let's just say to themselves, right, let's try out one summer, let's just try out an A, B, C championship. Completely throughout let's postpone the provincial championships for one summer, and let's see how it looks.
100%.
I would be in favour of that.
I think, like, you would need to sell it and sell it hard to the Division 2 and the Division 3 teams. But, like, there's an easy way to do that if you plan it out properly.
But let's just go to Munster Council, Leinster Council, Ulster and Connacht and say, listen, we're not getting rid of your provincial championships. Can we please just try for 1 year to see what would happen if we had, not a league format, but a tiered structure on an All-Ireland championship basis in the middle of the summer? Like, let's just see how it would work. Is it worth then perhaps, you know, letting go of these twee ideas that are provincial championships?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
But letting go of that is the problem. Maybe for one summer they might.
Quickly here, Owen Keogh says, maybe it's time for teams and counties to just accept the GAA has evolved into a game that possession of the ball actually gets you results and not punting into the mix so you're 6'4" player. I mean, I think that's a fair point. Obviously, there are times when a little bit of chaos in the full forward line is a beautiful thing, and it works still in soccer. Like, you know, you stick the big lad up front for the last 10 minutes and see what happens.
The chaos can still exist. It'll just be a broken ball as opposed to a clean catch.
Tons of sense there from Anthony Moyles. Darren Doherty says, rugby has modelled rule changes year on year. Some have worked and some haven't, but at least they are addressed. But there's a standing rules committee now, and in fairness, this is what they're doing. That's the whole point of this. Ronan Fitzgerald says, the rule changes are completely arbitrary and absurd. The GAA needs to let the game move forward towards the more tactical styles that have emerged. These rules are as if they want to force it back. There is a little bit of that, Ronan, and I think the trouble is that we don't have a culture of full-time professional coaches, which every other global sport has. There are full-time basketball coaches coming up with new and innovative ways to counteract whatever changes happen in the game. At the moment, all of the changes in the GAA world are essentially coming from the full-time coaches at colleges level, at Sigerson level. They're the ones who are kind of getting the inter-county players, putting them together, have a little bit of time to work with them and come up with some innovations. But they play in the shittest of shit weather, and so it's very hard to see exactly what that would look like in high summer. Joe Passmore says, loads of good points made by Anthony Moyles. Was he asked, for example, to contribute to group consultations? Also, rule changes typically implemented incrementally and quickly here, so the GAA can legislate quickly outside Congress when it suits. Now, what about fixtures? What about fixtures? What about the fixtures? Indeed. And then Jamie Wall, I've no idea what you're talking about, Jamie. Gerard channeling his inner Homer Simpson with his son. Owen, you tried your best and failed miserably. The lesson is, never try.
What did you say that about?
I presume it was about Declan Rice.
Yeah, you were very patronising on that occasion.
Never dream.
I'm sure everybody at home will agree.
Well, I mean, that was what was supposed to happen. Oh, look, it is! It's Del Boy, and there ain't no sign of a hat, Owen. Maybe that's what it was about.
Maybe he's...
How could you misremember that?
Well, you didn't exactly correct me at the time, did you?
Well, I was
you called me
so sure.
You called me a pedant
instead of... You were totally pedantic. Right, calling all students, we've teamed up with Vodafone X to fuel your passion for sport by giving you the chance to join Team Off the Ball for a whole week. You'll get to see what happens behind the scenes of a show, attend a press conference, help report at a match, and even feature as a co-host of the show. If that wasn't enough, you'll also receive an iPhone 8 with a year subscription to Vodafone X Sport, giving you access to 7 dedicated Sky Sports channels. To be in to win, just submit your demo tape and details to offtheball.com/VodafoneX. We're particularly interested if you're a Snapchat or Instagram genius, then and if you're particularly good at that, then make sure you get onto this. This may well be something for you. Offtheball.com/VodafoneX, and you could have own job in just a couple of weeks' time. People are asking what are the criteria for this. You just have to have a valid student card, be between 16 and 24.
Right, okay. So I'm in the mix.
You're in the mix. Okay, so that is that. Yeah, there is. I'm going to get to this now. We're going to speak with Chuck Mindenhall in a minute. So tonight is Tuesday night. There'll be more reflection and analysis and reaction
Wednesday.
On the
I really hope it is Wednesday. It's been a long week if not. Said with such confidence.
There you go. Del Boy had a hat. Today is Tuesday. We all get stuff wrong. Oh, Christ. Right. Yeah, shake that one off. Blink it away. Today is Wednesday. There is good Champions League action tonight. The lads will be covering it for you. I think Kenny Cunningham is back in studio from 7 o'clock on the radio on Newstalk, though. It's obviously the biggest story of the week is the fact that Khabib and Conor McGregor are going to go at it again for the first time properly.
Bigger than Munster Leinster?
I think that maybe there's a proper rivalry between McGregor and Khabib these days. Yeah, so we've been talking with Chuck Mindenhall from MMA Fighting and The Ringer about his McGregor-Ali comparisons, the importance of Saturday night for the UFC, and the bizarre rise of bare-knuckle boxing in the US. Have a look.
Our build-up to UFC 229, Conor McGregor against Khabib Nurmagomedov continues, and I'm delighted to say that Chuck Mindenhall of MMA Fighting and TheRinger.com joins us on the line. Good morning to you, Chuck. How are things?
Great, man. I'm actually getting set to head to Vegas right after this, so good timing, fellas.
Yeah, absolutely. It is this sort of, I'd say today is probably, for people in your position, quite a big transit day because everybody's flying over to make sure they're there for Thursday night for that press conference, the second press conference in the build-up to this fight. I guess we'll start with a fairly general question from the public utterances that you've heard from Conor McGregor and Khabib over the last fortnight or so. What's the main takeaway that you've taken about the two guys?
Well, I think the big takeaway is that there's genuine bad blood between these guys. I think we saw that in that initial press conference where you see Conor McGregor just really, really thrumming on every nerve, every anything he can get a mental advantage in this fight. He was already playing it. That was really interesting to see. I didn't know if he would show up in a more subdued form, given the whole Dolly incident with the bus in Brooklyn back in April. And rather than that, I always love the fact that he shows up and he's a little bit... he wants to ratchet things up even more. And here we are. He was already kind of playing that role a little bit. And heading into fight week, just the brief times we've heard him in the media a little bit talking, I feel like it's genuine bad blood. And it's interesting to see Conor McGregor from an emotional standpoint maybe being more involved than he normally would be in a fight like this.
Chuck, just on saying the fight and that first press conference performance, I saw in the piece you did for MMA Fighting straight away after your reaction, you said that you saw some comparisons between him and Ali in terms of selling a fight. Well, maybe talk us through what you were thinking there and where you see the comparisons between the two, and if you think that it is, a fair comparison to make at this stage.
I do. It's funny because I was one of the guys who might have been critical of that kind of comparison earlier in his career because we're just so quick to latch on to guys, new guys coming up, and want to assign them a kind of greatness comparison. We want to put them in context with other big fight promoters of the day. But it really comes down to, when the scrutiny gets big and the pressures are there and the doubts surmount, I feel like he steps up his game. And there's something about that mentality was really what Muhammad Ali was all about. Obviously, Muhammad Ali was coming from a whole different climate, and there was, there was a lot of turmoil in the world when he was when going through it with the war and everything else. But in this instance, I just feel like each time there is added scrutiny, added pressure, added magnitude, we see Conor McGregor show up in rarer and rarer form, not just meeting an expectation, because that's very difficult to do where he's put himself, but actually exceeding those expectations, both in the fight, in the lead up to the fight and usually come fight night. So in my mind, he is definitely doing that. I think he's tailor-made for promotion and tailor-made for that kind of greatness.
When you say you were critical early doors of this comparison, what do you mean by that? What were the certain things that you were critical of?
Well, I mean, from the earliest things, going back to the juvenile fights when he was, fighting over in Ireland and England, I felt like before he even got in the UFC, there was a lot of hype placed on Conor McGregor. By the time he was taking out Brimage and Max Holloway in Boston, and they're dropping the lights on him during prelims and everything else, I felt like we were hearing comparisons to people like Muhammad Ali, like that he could be the Irish Muhammad Ali or things like that. I felt like in America, at least, that kind of hyperbole, or so it seemed at the time, was fairly prevalent. And by the time he fought in Dublin against Brandao, it started to turn for me a little bit. But as he's handled the stage, the one-punch knockout of Aldo, and then the way he handled himself at MSG, these are the types of things when the stage gets that big and he's able to perform, not just back up. It's not that he's saying it, it's that he's backing up everything he says. And I think that once I saw those things happen and throughout the Mayweather stuff, I kind of changed my tune. But initially, I thought that those types of comparisons were not just irresponsible, but they're just a little bit irresponsible and premature, I would say. Yeah. So I was critical of people using that comparison.
And just in terms of kind of that one-man show we saw him put on there in New York, without any crowd to bounce off, even 2 or 3 weeks ago, did you think kind of he was capable of that type of performance and kind of going to that just maxed out kind of X-level McGregor that he seemed to summon?
I mean, I'm not surprised by anything he does anymore, but that was a tough situation. That room was just this big vacuous void. There wasn't any sound. It was just being swallowed. The microphone's just swallowed by this cathedral silence behind it. And he was still able to basically fill that room with energy, which to me, I mean, these are the types of feats maybe there's only one guy who can do that, and that's Conor McGregor. So to me, he's, I wouldn't say I'm surprised at this point, but you're always interested in what form he's going to show up and how he's going to manipulate the fight to his advantage.
Do you think that the presence of a crowd now on Thursday is going to change the dynamic significantly? And what do you expect from Thursday night in Vegas?
Oh, man, it's going to be fun because, you know how it is. Like, the Irish always show up, obviously, in Las Vegas or New York or wherever he's fighting. But I've been those last couple fights in Vegas, and they're always just... it's pandemonium, man. And when especially given the context of what's happened through this fight build-up, I think by Thursday, too, it's going to feel like it's filling in the bigness of what it's supposed to be. And I think he's going to feed off that energy 100%, man. It's been a couple of years. And he's the kind of guy, I think, who... he's a mastermind in terms of big picture setup, but he needs his fan. I think he feeds off of that energy from his fans. He likes to know that his country's behind him. And as you guys well know, I think he's at his very best when he's able to do that. So that's the highlight of the week, honestly, is what happens on Thursday until we get to the fight night. But that's the one reason to be in Vegas. If for the public or anybody else, the media, that's the one big reason to be out there, is just to see what happens there.
Yeah, it does seem that he's sort of trickling into this sort of classic McGregor siege mentality over the last couple of days. And I don't mean that in a negative way whatsoever. I think, as you say, he's at his best when he's got a cause, when it feels like it's himself and his fans against the world. And this sort of fury that exists within Conor McGregor that we've seen previously, a lot of people were saying was absent from that first press conference, that it was just kind of a darker bubbling under. But I think that's starting to bubble to the surface a little bit more, and he's starting to actually articulate the notion that he doesn't care what anybody thinks about him. And I can pretty much guarantee anybody that when it comes to Thursday night, we're going to see not a darker Conor McGregor as it's been described previously, but whatever that darkness is, it's going to be on the surface. We're going to have a little less guesswork to do when we try to suss out what Conor McGregor is trying to say.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. And it's funny because a lot of times I think, especially in this kind, because we're always in unprecedented territory, because it gets bigger and bigger each time he fights. But I think he, a lot of times, is psyching himself up. He's finding his own rhythm even before the fight. He's kind of figuring out how to burrow into a Nurmagomedov psyche and how to start to win that mental game beforehand. And I thought we were seeing like the first part of that in that initial press conference, and I think we'll see that ratcheted up to 11 by the time we get to Thursday. So it should be a lot of fun, man. It's also fun just to point out, like, the stoicism. Obviously, it's the perfect foil to have Nurmagomedov, who's like stone-faced and very reticent fellow, who's, he just seems completely nonplussed by all of this. So that dynamic of putting those two together in a raucous crowd, I think that's going to be a lot of fun to see.
And Chuck, just given the kind of media appearance we've seen from McGregor in the last few days, one of the comments stood out to me was him telling the Mac Life that, he momentarily fell out of love with the fight game. Does he strike you as a guy who has a lot of time left in the UFC, who's going to be around much longer?
That's a great question. Sometimes, see, the mentality of a lot of fighters, especially when they're on top, is that they could leave at any time. Anderson Silva was threatening to leave the game during his greatness, his run of greatness, multiple times. We'd hear the retirement, how many we got left? I feel like guys who are on top of the game have a much looser sense of how long they want to stay in because they're still dictating their own terms. I think that everything is still dancing to their tune at that point. Now, what happens if he loses? That's the question. Does he then want to keep going to regain the thing that he lost? And I feel like Conor McGregor strikes me as the guy who might go through that kind of transition if he starts to lose some of that luster. I don't think the money is going to dictate everything for him. I think that he craves that kind of attention. You have to crave that kind of attention to uphold your responsibilities to the point he does and to flourish in that kind of scrutiny. So I think that if he loses, we could end up seeing him, for years to come. If he wins, I still think we'll see him probably in, big fights, like the type of big fights that may not make sense to titles and things like that. They'll just be big fights that make sense to Conor McGregor at that point. But the loss is really where I'm like, once you see a guy lose, I think is when you start to see how long they really want to go.
Well, that's very true. And I think when he says this week that it's not about the money for him anymore, like a lot of people aren't buying that. There's a big part of me that does buy that. And there is a big part of me that Conor McGregor, when he listens to conversations like the idea that you mentioned, that you started to think that he is resembling Muhammad Ali in certain ways of his character, that sort of stuff really does matter to Conor McGregor, that there is a legacy of Conor McGregor. And if we just revisit the Ali comparison for just one moment, what did Muhammad Ali have in his career? Well, he had fantastic rivalries. And I mean, a Khabib rematch, given how, if this fight is a classic, say, on Saturday, would be something that would create a rivalry straight away. We already have a great modern rivalry with Nate Diaz. A trilogy there would turn that into a classic modern rivalry, and suddenly you start to tick another one of the Muhammad Ali boxes.
Yes, 100%, man. I agree with you 100%. And we always look at the golden age of our heavyweights in boxing in the 70s, and man, you're absolutely right. The way it was constructed, there were multiple good, very capable, very strong and dangerous people all at the top. Well, that's kind of the setup we're dealing in, especially for a guy like McGregor who can fight in multiple weight classes and actually has the clout to lobby for and possibly develop for himself the 165-pound weight class when it's all said and done. I think that all of that combined, man, he is set up to do whatever he wants. But he's already. I think that Diaz fight sits out there glaring, to be taken up and to finish out. So that trilogy will happen at some point. And obviously, this Nurmagomedov, just depending on how it goes, though, if Nurmagomedov goes out there and gets smoked in the first round, kind of like José Aldo did, that's not a rivalry anymore. I think he puts the Nurmagomedov thing behind him. But if the fight is really contested, and especially if he loses a close fight or it's a back and forth war or something like that, you're absolutely right, man. I think that Nurmagomedov fits that bill 100% to give him an ongoing rivalry throughout the rest of his career.
That's interesting, Chuck. Just on the comparison with, say, the golden era of heavyweight boxing, but there's also the issue here that kind of McGregor's a linchpin and all that. If he steps away now, is the McGregor-shaped hole in the UFC bigger than ever? Are they more reliant than ever on McGregor?
That's a good question, man. This week is very telling. I know the very first piece I worked on for The Ringer is really about like what this means. What does this fight mean? How pivotal is it for the UFC? It's very difficult to forecast. But I do know one thing. I mean, 2.5 million, if that's really the projected total, you have to think, like, if you added up all the pay-per-views of 2018, it falls short of 2.5 million. It's like one event makes up for a mediocre slate for 9-10 months or whatever it is. To me, that's the kind of thing that is just very different. We're not used to it. We're not used to trying to figure out what a guy of that magnitude means. A guy who literally is admired and resented at the same time by everybody on the roster because he's able to accomplish what he does. His greatness is complicated. It's a weird place you're in. Nurmagomedov winning would be business possibly for the UFC in terms of a rematch. I'm not sure where it puts Nurmagomedov in terms of star. Like, I think his name will be out there, but at the same time, does he become public enemy number one for knocking off an icon? It's like there are so many weird factors to this fight. It really just comes down to how it plays out. I just feel like history will be shuffling with each exchange in there. But ultimately, man, it feels like the UFC is finally kind of getting back on pace. Maybe I'm duping myself to believe that, but having McGregor back, to me, this is the biggest fight in the UFC's history. And, having John Jones and Brock Lesnar and a couple of the other big draws on deck and getting ready to fight, I feel like it's finally to a place where there's a chance for a little bit of a resurrection, a little bit of a build back up.
And just kind of on that team joke, one of the things that we've been reading is the pieces you've written for The Ringer about the UFC's CM Punk experiment, bringing over WWE superstar, trying to cash in there. You wrote that ultimately that experiment backfired. Do you think that the UFC will have the same view as you on that? And if they are kind of, missing their McGregor, missing the man who's going to come and fill the coffers, could you see them going for something like that again?
Oh, man. Well, I'll tell you, the UFC never agrees with me on any of this stuff, so that's an easy one. But, ultimately, you're protecting the sanctity of the octagon by saying that the best people in the world are actually in there competing to find out who the best fighter in the world is, right? Like, it's all aimed toward that goal. The CM Punk thing was not about that, and I think that is where that experiment failed, because the bottom line was he was never going to be anything. We were watching him in a whole different set of circumstances, which was literally, hey, let's see if this guy can achieve a bucket list thing after training for a couple years with Duke Roufus and all this. How far can he go? And it turns out he just looked bad in there, and I think that's a bad look for the UFC. I do believe, though, having said all of that, that we may trend in that direction, especially with more people. You hear the Logan Paul stuff or whoever. Like, people want to do this. You can't deny that any set, especially when you see the pay-per-views are coming in below 200,000, 150,000, 130,000, and you think, what are they going to do? This is a business first, right? Like, you have to figure out how to make people pay attention. And you have now an ownership group that's based on entertainment. I think that all those things combined, I don't think we'll see the last of a meritless fighter making his way into the UFC just to draw eyes. Let's put it that way.
That's the thing. Once they got a bite of the Conor McGregor cherry and the figures that comes with that, they're not going to let that go too soon. Just one tangent we want to take with you, Chuck, before we wrap up this morning. The idea of bare knuckle fighting, I say forget the UFC for a moment and let's talk about the BKFC, because you went to Wyoming in June. You wrote a great piece for theringer.com. We'll throw up a link on our Twitter. You were there at the first event of the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, as I say, in Wyoming. Talk to us about it. What the hell is this?
Well, I wasn't actually there. I watched. Right. I just pay-per-view. Yeah, but I was in close contact with all the guys who were there, and I was really interested in it. And obviously, something that's there's so many weird factors of something like this, because it's like with MMA, you always figure out why you're psychologically drawn to it, right? And so we go through these. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. You're like, well, what am I? What do I like about this? And you have to kind of answer questions about that. And it's a guilty pleasure in some ways, whatever you want to find. But like the bare knuckle thing is the stripped down version of it that's a little bit cruder, a little bit ratcheted towards something more barbaric, and all of that was. It's very intriguing in a PC world like this. So all of a sudden we're dealing with guys taking off the gloves, and not to protect face. The reason they wear gloves is not to protect the faces so much as the knuckles. And it's one of those type of things that I was intrigued as to how this would look. If you're talking about the very first one, did you guys watch it? Because to me it felt very kind of refreshing to see the kind of joy these fighters took in the fact that they could fight like that. It was like they've been held back by MMA and all the broad. Takedowns and kicks and everything. So suddenly, if you're in a box match with bare knuckle, I felt like these guys were just in seventh heaven. You know what I mean? To be able to fight that way. And there's a couple people who I think were tailor-made to fight that way. So I think the verdict's still out on it. Obviously, the last couple matches, the last fight card, it seemed like it kind of lost some of its steam already. And I'm not sure if having bigger names involved might help it, or if it's just going to take some time to get rolling. But I do think that there's a place for it. That's my initial gut feeling. I think there's a place for it, and it's great for these fighters who maybe didn't pan out in the UFC or in boxing, whatever. They have a place to go where they can resurrect themselves. I always like that narrative as well.
Is it legal all over the United States, and is there a stringent set of rules that they have to abide by?
Well, it's not legal yet everywhere. So the Wyoming and I think what was Biloxi, Mississippi, those are the two places that have held it, and I believe they're going back to both of those places. There's two different organizations going back to those two places. Talking to the organizer and the promoter at the what's it called, the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, the first one that ran. He said that, you know, a lot of states were waiting to find out how the first one would look, so they needed the pioneer to be something like Wyoming, where they went in there and showed what it would look like, and it wasn't as crazy and as dangerous as everybody might think, and all this. And then Mississippi came aboard. According to him, there were multiple states lining up after that, and that they would be hitting multiple states in this coming year. So right now, no, it is not. It is not legal in every state. But it sounds like they're working on that. They're kind of like where the UFC was back in like 2000. You know, they're in the process.
Yeah, and like you make this comparison in the article as well, that it is very reminiscent of the good old days of the UFC. The Wild West nature of it all, I think, is the term you use. And for sure, there is an appeal to that. There is a market out there for the way the UFC used to be, rather than this quite corporate, quite polished version of what it is now. I mean, we had Hoyce Gracie in this very studio a few months ago, and some of the stories he tells are amazing. I mean, going up against sumo wrestlers in the first ever UFC, these are brilliant stories. And of course, as you say, there is a huge audience for that. It's not exactly the thing that maybe those people want, but there is something there. There is an appeal, like there was an appeal for the very first few UFCs.
Yeah, I mean, there's still like this guerrilla, like renegade feel to it, right? Like you put these two guys in there, and it feels like you're checking kind of your inhibitions at the door to watch something like that. And I that vibe, that kind of more underground vibe, or that like that's what fed the original niche, right? Like it was like the essence that went into it, that it was outside of the PC world. That, you know, the original UFC was it operated and flourished really on taboos, and I feel like that's what the bare knuckle thing is going in for. So the bare knuckle thing is like happily going in for the taboos, whereas the UFC at some point had to start distancing themselves from it. And I think that so that's where the divide starts. A lot of people can look back on the original idea there and be like, hey, we're home. You know, this is what we liked originally. It was just that it wasn't PC and it wasn't polished, it wasn't corporate, and it's kind of like the reinvention of that old thing. You know, that old idea.
And Chuck, going into their kind of third and fourth events, which are cited, is there kind of a buzz building around that federation, or is there kind of initial curiosity that's kind of starting to die off?
What was I'm sorry, you're asking about the bare knuckle in terms of
just in whether we obviously had this initial coverage of it and kind of the morbid fascination. Then when you get onto events 2, 3, 4, does it seem to be finding a niche that's got a bit of momentum behind it, or does it seem to be kind of maybe? It
seems like it's already fizzling, but I do feel like that you know, I think that the verdict's still out. I think you're right. We're gonna have to see like 3, 4, and 5 and just see what happens. You have to see what kind of names they bring in, and see if the fights themselves really pan out. Because I thought the second set of fights, you saw a lot more technical, and as crazy as it sounds, as counterintuitive, it almost took away from the effect. I think people want to see people going in there with this why not attitude of just throwing bombs and trying to knock each other out. So I think that it's still in the process of identifying itself. And I know one thing, the second event, in terms of traffic, if you're talking about just traffic for web like hits and things like that, was way, way down from the first one. So that's not a good sign. But I feel like you have to give them a fair shake to, you know, time to see where they end up, maybe first quarter of 2019. But it could be a flash in the pan, man. I mean, let's face it, if they can't get the thing rolling, it won't be able to survive. They won't be able to pump that kind of money into it.
Yeah, it's one to be keeping an eye on. Just before we let you go, you mentioned that sort of every time McGregor comes around, we're not sure what iteration, what persona we're going to see. Of the kind of McGregors we've seen, and specifically the McGregor fights, looking back, do you have a favourite McGregor fight for any specific reason why one really stood out to you?
You know, it's funny because what was the one? Was it José Aldo when he showed up with Ido Portal in the pool noodles and all that? And I remember thinking at the time, I was thinking maybe he jumped the shark a little bit, and that maybe he was already, you know, like Tom Brady in the NFL and football over here has like a health guru guy, and there's all kinds of headlines about this, and you start to think like, okay, now we're in like the new age Tom Brady. It was almost like that moment, but it clearly wasn't. Everything he's done so far has been purposeful, and I think that that's like a tribute to him and how serious he really is. His actions speak louder than his words in most cases. That particular lead-up was very, very interesting. But, man, I got to go back to the first Nate Diaz fight because I thought that you know how it is with him. Like, I think he really feasts on people's doubts. And it was one of those situations, he's supposed to be fighting Dos Anjos, and Dos Anjos gets hurt, and then it becomes Nate Diaz. There's this huge, compelling moment where it's like, whoa, we never thought we'd see these two guys fight each other. And the way McGregor sort of handled it, and he was already so full of material, like just like he'd been waiting for this fight to happen, which was crazy. But just the way he showed up prepared and with the one-liners at that impromptu press conference, and to me, that was vintage. It just shows you how deep that guy is, man. It was vintage McGregor. So I think that so far that is still my favorite, just given the circumstances.
Yeah, it's interesting you make the Tom Brady comparison, you know, TB12, proper 12, all the stars are aligning here between these two superstars. Chuck Mindenhall, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to chat to you. Enjoy Thursday night, but most importantly, enjoy Saturday night.
All right. Thank you, fellas. Appreciate it.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.